winter's coming.
The king has returned from the broken ruins of Babylon. This is the end of days. And hello, everybody. Yes, it is me. It is Daniel, the DAN, the All-American Man. And I am joining you all from the most wonderful city of Seattle, Washington, located here in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. I'm so excited for this. This is a very unusual program. Tonight, it's always an unusual program, but it's going to be an extra unusual program because we are joined by none other than the creator of the creator of Bellgab himself, MV, also known as Michael Vandeven, or Michael Vandeven, however you like to pronounce that. I'm super excited about this because, as many of you know, I've been kind of aware, semi-taking part of the whole. But tonight we are joined by MV, and I'm gonna ask him like everything that I could possibly think of. I'm gonna ask him about how Bellgab started, what was going through his head, how he made it through all these years. I've been around quite a while. I want to say that I've been a fan of what MV was doing, like, when he first started, but I don't think I was there that early. I think I got to it maybe, I don't know. I don't know exactly when, but I signed up for Bellgab in 2008, and I was a member of the previous forum before that. So that shows you how far I go back, and I feel really old. That's for sure, because it's 2016, and 2008 was 8 years ago. So I was a much younger man. I was in my early 20s. Now I've lost all sorts of hair, and all sorts of my hair has turned gray, and I just am not the same young man that I used to be. But I may not be as physically able as I was, but luckily I am older and I'm wiser, so that's a good thing. One thing I want to talk about real quick before we get started with our guest was last week's show. Actually, hold on a second. Before I get to that, let me talk about this new format a little bit. So, every once in a while, a person that isn't a normal fan of the show, they will come across the show through various means, and they'll get a little bit mad because some people have been complaining that I'm bringing guests on this show, and I'm trying to, like, trick people into listening to a half an hour of me talk before we get to the guest. And for a long time, I did not care about those complaints. I would just tell people to basically shut up if they said anything about it. But I've been thinking, and I've decided that, maybe they have a point. Maybe it does feel kind of manipulative to do something like that. And that's not the message that I'm trying to send. Just more and more, I want to be very upfront and honest and straightforward with the fans and straightforward with what I'm doing here, because I feel like credibility is everything in this. I'm not going to call it business because I don't think anybody makes money doing this, but in what I'm doing here, I think credibility is everything. So I'm going to cut back the chit chat at the top of the show just a little bit, curve it back, and I'm going to move it to the end of the show after the guests. There's still going to be a lot of shows where we don't even have guests, but I'm going to move about half of the beginning talk to the end. That way we get right into things a little bit quicker. And for those of you that like listening to me and the things that I have to say, you'll stick around and you'll keep listening, you'll call in. So that should satisfy the new people that, get annoyed by stuff like that. And it should satisfy the people that enjoy listening to me. So I'm going to kind of call it, I've already started this, but I'm going to kind of call it a wrap-up period. So the time after our guests, I'm going to call wrap-up, and that's the time when you guys get to call in. And once again, I don't care what you call in about. If you want to share anything at all, that's fine. Of course, it's better if it's paranormal related, because that's what people are tuning into the show to hear. But I want to increase the fan interaction just a little bit by having a real strong set period where people can call in. And no, I will not be taking calls for the most part when guests are on, unless they want to take calls. Part of that is because these calls are unscreened. And I do not like when people call in and get mouthy with the guests. Well, for 99% of people are fine, but every once in a while you have somebody that calls in and gets mouthy, and it just makes me look bad, makes the show look bad. So we're just gonna, focus on putting together a quality interview. And if the guest is cool with taking some calls, we'll go ahead and do that. But for the most part, the call-in period is going to be after the guest, and it's going to be more consistent. So I'm always going to open up the lines to make sure that you guys have a chance to call in. And I absolutely love the calls, but you have like that 1%, that jerk. You always have one in the room that wants to ruin everybody's good time. So we'll do it like that. And what was I going to talk about? Oh, that's right. So last week's show was a huge hit. We're coming off the heels of a really stellar interview. Some people are saying that it was the best show, at least the best show since the split that they've heard me do. So I'm very happy about that. That was the interview with Robert Stanley. We got very deep into conspiracy, into aliens, Luciferians, stuff like that. And it's a huge hit. So I highly recommend, if you do like this show and you have not listened to that interview yet, feel free to go back there, go to endofdaysradio.com, subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, however you want to get the show, and listen to that show, because I'm very proud of it. I normally don't talk about being proud of a show or proud of an interview or anything like that, but I am really proud of that. I've been trying to talk to Robert Stanley for a while. Finally managed to get a hold of him. Part of the problem was he actually moved to China, so you can imagine what I would have to go through to take care of that. I don't know why he's there. If he wants to continue his research in the East, I'm not sure, but I'm sure he's digging up some ancient Chinese pyramids or something. He's probably doing something really important. Other thing that I want to talk about, as many of you are aware, last week I did not go on air. I do apologize. Am I yelling? I need to work on that. I think I'm yelling again. I don't need to yell into the mic. But one thing that I wanted to do was apologize for not being here last Saturday, because I told you guys that I would always be here every Saturday night at 7:30, but I was not able to make it. I just took the night off. I apologize. I took the night off. I did like 5 shows in a row. I did End of Days Radio 2 or 3 times. Hello.
Hey there, buddy.
There he is. There he is.
I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound excellent.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, you sound good on this end, too. It's nice to be on the real End of Days Radio.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I do consider this the real End of Days Radio. As you know, there was recently a split, so I'm really happy to have you on here, and definitely very happy to have you, giving this program some validity. As you know, I've been keeping...
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Yeah, actually, I re-listened to your interview with Art Bell just a couple days ago. God, that was a masterpiece.
You think it was? I mean, I thought the reviews were kind of mixed.
Well, I think that's purely you just getting caught up in the anger of Art Bell leaving. He's doing a free show, and all of a sudden he just kind of stops after he already did the thing with Sirius. So I think that's probably you just getting caught up in that, because when I listened, I was blown away. I've never heard anybody bring that much like realness out of Art. That was incredible.
Well, thanks, dude. I really appreciate that. We're not on right now, are we?
Oh, we are on. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. I'm sorry. Well, when I'm sitting here snorting and sipping my hot chocolate.
My bad. I should have warned you. But yeah, we're live. We're broadcasting.
Well, when you do something like that, you're going to be your own worst critic. But yeah, there were a lot of people who were, let's just say, less than pleased. And I think you might be right. I think some of that was just, it wasn't maybe necessarily a direct and specific critique of the interview itself as much as it was just their opinion of what they'd heard being tainted by the emotion of everything that had happened. Because everything was still pretty fresh at the time that was done. Hell, I think it's coming up on a year ago that was done. Maybe not yet. I don't remember when it was done. But, you know, the things were still fresh. I think that was shortly after Art had left Midnight in the Desert. Maybe a month after, 2 at the most. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was definitely right on the heels of all that. Of course, there's a huge fallout. I found out about it not much long after. Like many people, I was waiting and waiting and waiting for Art's contract with Sirius to expire so he could provide the free show and do everything that he wanted to do. So I was just as disappointed as everybody else, but there's that little part of me that as a fan, it doesn't want to criticize a personal hero of mine. But yeah, I was upset.
Well, I remember when Art announced that he was going to go on Sirius, because I wanted him at that time, back in 2013, I wanted him to do at that time what he ultimately ended up trying to do with Midnight in the Desert, which was to do his own internet stream and just go it alone. At that time, I really hoped that was what he was going to do. And then when I found out he was going to go with Sirius XM, it was rather disappointing to hear that. In part because I've been a long-time Opie and Anthony listener on Sirius XM.
Oh, okay.
And I always heard them talk about what a horrible company it is, both to work for and in terms of its logistics, just the way the company runs. And I had never listened to Opie and Anthony on the Sirius XM stream that the company provided for people who were subscribers, but I constantly heard them just complaining incessantly about that stream and just how it's a pile of garbage. It just did not work. The company apparently didn't have any interest in doing anything about it. The company was owned at that point, around the time Art came in. By that point, I'm pretty sure it was already owned by some holding company, just a bunch of people with big bags of money. I don't know if you call it a holding company. It's owned by some sort of conglomerate. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a bunch of people who really have no specific interest in radio. They just have a bunch of money to invest in things. And Sirius just happened to be the latest thing that they decided to invest in, and so they own it. So it's owned and operated by people who have no specific interest or passion for radio. And when I heard Art was going to go with them, right away, way back in 2013, that did not feel good to me. And I wasn't at all surprised to see how that ended up. I was surprised at how quickly it went south, but I just had a gut feeling at the time. I think you could even go back, if you were to go back and find my posts immediately after it was revealed that he was going to go with Sirius XM, I just kind of, that was my response pretty much. And not to say that was unique to me, that I'm some sort of a seer. A lot of people were pretty disappointed that was his choice. They didn't think it was a good way to go, and turned out to be the case.
Yeah, I suppose I felt similarly. I was excited because I had always been a huge Howard Stern fan, and then once I found out Art Bell was moving to Sirius, I immediately went out and I signed up. I paid for the subscription, everything, because finally there was enough there to justify enough value there to make me actually purchase the subscription. But I've heard the same thing from listening to Howard. When he first started, there was certain people there, and they've all made their money. They're all out of the picture now, and there's a completely different lineup of guys there, and they don't treat him the same way. They don't treat him with the same respect. It's just all about personal profit and greed and whatnot.
Well, I was never really a huge Howard listener. I really love his movie, and I like what he did for radio. Unfortunately, what he did for radio has been completely wiped away and erased, because radio today is more politically correct and locked down than ever before. When we think about the timeline of the progress of a society in terms of how liberal it is. I don't mean politically liberal. I mean in terms of personal freedom liberal. When we think about how a society progresses, we think of it in that linear fashion where as you progress forward, personal freedom and your ability to say and do what you want expand. But for whatever reason, and I think it can kind of be traced to that moment that Janet Jackson showed her flat, saggy pancake breast on TV. I think that's kind of the moment where a ripple occurred in the universe. You know, an atom was split.
The pancake that changed the world.
Yeah. And so as we look at radio today, relative to just, say, 20 years ago, what you were able to get away with on the radio 20 years ago, I mean, good grief. You would think that we're living in the middle of the Donna Reed show right now. Yeah, that's real young and hip. I'll make a reference to a 1950s TV show that almost nobody alive now knows about. But it's the truth. I mean, radio is more locked down than ever before, and that's why I say that everything that Howard did for radio, it seems to have largely been wiped away. But I will say this about Howard. There's nobody anywhere as good as he is at conducting an interview. I have heard him pull things out of people that you never would have imagined possible. I mean, you listen to him sitting there asking Paul McCartney how many chicks he's had sex with, you know, just really specific, pointed, personal questions that no one else would have the balls to sit there and ask one of the former Beatles, particularly Paul McCartney.
You know, that is kind of what I liked about your Art Bell interview, is that you were talking to him as a human being talking to another human being. I did not get the impression that you were talking to him like you were in awe or he was your idol. It really made it a much better interview.
Well, I was really nervous at first in that interview because he is an idol to me. And I don't care what people think about his personal life. I never became an Art Bell. When the first time I heard Art Bell on the radio, I didn't say, yes, this man conducts his personal life in a way that I can put my seal of approval on. I think I'll listen. That's got nothing to do with why I signed on to be an Art Bell fan back in 1993. Maybe it was 92. It was somewhere in there. I was pretty young. I was 11, 12, something like that. So, yeah, I was really nervous. I do consider him someone that I have a lot of respect for in terms of what he accomplished in radio, and that never went away from me. And so I was really nervous initially during that interview, but after just maybe 5 to 10 minutes, I just kind of forgot who I was talking to, and it felt like I was just talking to any other person. And that may be more of a credit to him than me.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I did want to kind of ask you is, when you originally got into the paranormal, did Art Bell get you into the paranormal, or were you already kind of into it before you found Art Bell?
Well, I don't know how into paranormal I would say I necessarily am. I mean, I've always been interested in life after death, whether there is life after death. I've kind of obsessed on that topic at certain points in my life. But I don't worry about Planet X. I don't expect I'm ever going to see proof of Bigfoot, and I don't care about rods. You know what I mean? It's like when I think of paranormal, what comes to mind when I hear that word is a very specific subset of the paranormal field, and that is supernatural activity, ghosts, life after death. And I was already really, really interested in all of that stuff well before I ran into Art Bell. But, you know, you look at successful people in broadcasting, particularly talk radio, those people became successful because they filled a vacuum that needed filling. And so these were things that I already was interested in. And finally, hey, here's this guy on the radio talking about all this stuff and interviewing people who are interested in these things. And the first time I ever heard an EVP, the first time I ever even became aware of that as a phenomenon, as a possibility, to record voices that shouldn't be recorded, that should not be on whatever mechanism you're using to record audio. The first time I ever ran into that was Art Bell. I don't remember when it was. It was probably the first appearance of the GIS, the Ghost Investigator Society. And, man, that was really kind of a seminal moment. And after that, I started going out and doing a lot of my own little ghost hunts. I'd take my buddies, we'd go to cemeteries, mausoleums, and really recorded some compelling stuff that cannot be explained. And I don't really, there are a lot of people who don't believe in any of that stuff and will confidently tell you, it's all bull crap. Well, that's great that you think that, but I have personally experienced things that just don't quite add up in this material world that we live in. And so I'm not interested in convincing anybody of what it is that I've captured in terms of evidence. That's not at all something I'm interested in doing, because like anything, if you want to believe in life after death, that's a faith. If you want to believe there's nothing after we die, that's really a faith as well. I mean, there's no proof one way or the other. And when it comes to any sort of a faith, you're not going to convince anybody one way or the other. If people refuse to believe whatever evidence you've captured, presenting them with more of the evidence, just that's not going to get anywhere. So that I don't care about.
Now, you just told me something pretty cool. You told me that you have actually had not only a paranormal experience, but you've actually tracked it and you've logged it and you have almost a type of proof. Has anything else paranormal ever happened to you besides these EVPs?
You know, I think I've told this story before, but when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to my mind, well, I will just in passing say that I think I saw my great-grandfather when I was about 4 years old. But that's kind of a lengthy story. What I would like to tell you, more so than that story, is the one where I was about 19 years old. I went with my girlfriend and a buddy of mine, and I think she had two of her friends with us. And, you know, every little small town has some place you can go to called Inspiration Point. You know, that's just, it seems like everywhere there's some place called that. Well, here in southeast Missouri, if you want to go to something called Inspiration Point, you drive across the Mississippi River into southern Illinois, and you go to Shawnee National Forest, and there's this giant, I guess it's a bluff, and there's a portion of it that protrudes out really far. So you're effectively just standing on a cliff there, suspended about 350 feet above the ground. If you go do a Google image search of Inspiration Point, Shawnee National Forest, or Inspiration Point, Southern Illinois, whatever, you'll find it. You'll see all kinds of pictures. That's where we were. We were standing right on that rock. It was probably midnight, maybe even later. I think we were all probably smoking pot. So I will add that caveat, but anyone who has smoked pot knows that it's not going to result in what I'm going to tell you. So we're all standing there on this rock, and we look over to the left-hand side, and there are these three lights. And since it was so dark, there's not really any point of reference for you to determine how far away from you they are. But just the way they looked, I would say they were probably 75 to 100 feet away. Pretty close. And they were in a triangular formation, and they were rotating, just slowly turning. I think one of them was red, one of them was orangish, and I don't remember what color the other one was, but it was of that color family. It wasn't like the third light was green. It was kind of reddish, as I recall. And these lights are just rotating slowly. Everyone is quiet as can be. This thing is entirely inexplicable. We're 350 feet up. There should be nothing. There's no electricity up there. There's nothing up there that should be generating light. I mean, if you were to, in the daylight, cast your eyes upon the direction where these lights were, it would be right there along the cliff. So there's no reason for any light source to be there. And everybody is just as quiet as they can be, and I turn to everybody, and they're all just not really responding. And I'm like, are you guys seeing this? because I was shocked that everyone was aware of it. They were looking at it, but they weren't commenting on it. And I just couldn't believe that. We're looking at a total anomaly here that should not be here. What in the hell is this? And I turned to everybody. Why are you guys, do you guys see this? And I don't recall anybody responding. And I have no memories from that point until I recall being in a car driving home and everybody was just quiet. I would call that a paranormal experience. I don't know what the lights were. I don't know why nobody responded to them or reacted in any way. And I have no recollection of what happened from that point until we were on the road driving back home. Weird.
Yeah, that is definitely strange. I had a similar experience when I was much younger. Same thing, some lights, actually saw a triangle craft. But let me ask you, is this what inspired you to go with the name UFO Ship?
No, I was just trying to come up with, because UFO Ship was originally UFOship.com. It was originally just an Art Bell fan site, and it didn't look anything like it does now. It wasn't even a podcast associated website, really. It just had things about Art Bell. It had I would get in there and randomly complain about things, just Nancy Pelosi is a whore, rah, and submit. It was really a stupid website, and but it was tied to the Art Bell universe because I had a pirate Art Bell stream, and after every 3-hour show would play, after the commercials and everything, those 5-hour shows would come out to about 3 hours. After every one of those would play, there would be an advertisement promoting UFOship.com. This was well before Bellgab. And so I had to come up with a domain name that sort of seemed like it would fit into that universe. And as you can imagine, I think this was in 2005. I mean, by that point, pretty much any UFO-related domain name of consequence was taken. So that's what I ended up settling on. Now it seems like it kind of UFO Ship. It kind of rolls off the tongue, but at the time I first came up with it, it seemed like an odd couple of words to put together. It didn't ever really have any kind of a good ring to it to me.
Now, as far as UFOs and aliens, what are your personal beliefs on that? Do you believe that there's aliens out there? Are they here? Are they walking around with us? Are they abducting people? Does the government know about them?
Well, there's this BBC documentary on space. It's a 6-part documentary. It's hosted by Sam Neill, and it's several years old. I'll bet you it's probably a good 12, 13 years old. And in that documentary, they make a point as they're standing on a beach. Sam Neill scoops up a load of sand into his hand, and he says, "Imagine how many grains of sand are in your hand. 100,000, 200,000. Now imagine how many grains of sand are on a beach." And then he says, "Now imagine how many grains of sand are in the entire world. Multiply that by 1 million, and you'll have some idea of how many stars scientists believe to exist in the universe." Well, that number is, the human mind can barely wrap itself around the number 1,000. You can say the number 1,000, and you might buy something that costs $1,000. You might have a jar that's got 1,000 beads in it, but your mind really, once you get over a certain point, the human brain has kind of a hard time wrapping itself around the physicality of a certain number. So 1,000 of anything is really, and beyond that, forget it. The human mind, 1 million of something, the human mind cannot really comprehend the physicality of 1 million anything. So when you think of a number that large, every grain of sand on the earth multiplied times 1 million, and that's how many stars are believed to exist in the universe, which, how you could even quantify that, considering the supposed infinite nature of the universe. I would think it would be even bigger than that. But when you think about that, every one of those stars is a sun with bodies potentially orbiting it, just like our sun. And to think that there's no other life out there, that thought to me is just laughable, really. If I were to run into someone who thinks that there's no other life in the universe, I would just think that I'm talking to somebody who really doesn't grasp the enormity of the word enormity doesn't even come close to acknowledging just the vast, infinite nature of space and how much stuff, how much matter is out there, how many planetary bodies are out there. So, here's a good, what was it, was it the Viking that they launched in the 70s that just recently, a few years ago, made its way out of our solar system?
I believe so, yeah, the Viking.
Yeah, I think it was Bateman on Bellgab posted a picture of Viking just as it was leaving our solar system, a picture of Earth from that far away. And it just looks like a speck of dust. It was so far away from Earth at that point. I did the math, and I calculated that it took about, when the Viking began transmitting that picture back to Earth, the first packet of data to reach Earth as that transmission was occurring took about 6 hours. At the speed of light. RF travels just like light at the speed of light. That's an incomprehensible distance. And but you look at this little speck, and it really drives the point home of just how fragile everything is, just how inconsequential we really are. And really, when you take enough time to ponder all of this, it kind of gives you a sense of futility, really. That's how this, I've pondered this for a long time, and it really has given me, you go about your life and you try to achieve and do things, and but really you come to a sort of realization that that's all window dressing in a sense, because nothing that happens here really matters. I've kind of reached that mindset, and it's a depressing mindset to have. Not because it doesn't matter to me what happens here on this earth. Things that happen here do matter to me. It's just that in the grand scheme of the cosmos, nothing that happens here really matters at all. You don't have to go very far away from our planet before it begins to look like an insignificant speck. Yeah,
I have to agree with all of that. One thing I did forget to ask you earlier was, after I've asked you a few more questions, I have plenty more, but would you mind taking a few calls from some of your fans and followers after a while?
Oh, that's sure, yeah, no problem.
Okay, excellent. And
do people ever say no to that question?
Probably not, but my Skype has just been lighting up left and right, people trying to call in. I finally had to hit the old do not disturb. So everybody out there, please just give me a few more minutes here with Michael, and then we'll go ahead and open up the phone lines for you guys. Now, the next question I wanted to ask is, I wanted to kind of get into the beginning and the roots of Bellgab. Why did you start Bellgab? What was going through your head?
Well, it was originally George Norrie Sucks. I used to occasionally read the George Norrie Sucks thread over at Godlike Productions, and I discovered it just by simply typing George Norrie Sucks into Google. And, I gave George a solid couple of years when he initially took over Coast to Coast AM. But I knew deep down inside that I was just doing this because I was longing for what no longer was. And I was trying to recapture something that no longer existed, and that was Art Bell. And so after about 2 years of really giving George a legitimate chance, I just couldn't take it anymore, and I'd had enough with the non sequiturs and the just the random injections of observation and the aw shucks bullcrap. I couldn't take it anymore. That's one thing I always liked about Art. He always seemed like he could be a little bit of an asshole. He kind of always had just this sort of edge to him, like he didn't suffer fools. And that's a good thing. This concept, this idea that you have to be this milquetoast, go along, get along, everybody likes you, you're inoffensive to all type of personality in order to properly traverse the radio business, that's ridiculous. You don't need to be that at all. You just need to be a personality, whatever that manifests itself as. But anyway, I gave George a solid chance and couldn't take it anymore. The George Norrie Sucks thread at Godlight Productions got shut down, although I bought GeorgeNorrieSucks.com, I think, well before that happened. And I didn't know what to do with it. I think I owned it for probably 4 years or so before I actually started a forum on that domain name, which is what now has come to be known as Bellgab. All of those posts from way back when, from the very first post, they're all still there. It's just that the forum has gone through three domain name changes, 3 name changes for various reasons, and eventually the George Norrie Sucks thread on Godlight Productions got shut down. I can't imagine why. I don't know why. I mean, really, I can't begin to understand why an administrator would shut that down. It was such an active thread. There wasn't anything. I don't know. I guess some people are just so scared of getting sued or something. I don't know what it was that caused them to shut that down, but they did. And when they did shut that down, it really made the existence of GeorgeNorrieSucks.com worthwhile, relevant, and meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've been a little bit hesitant to talk about just because I wasn't sure the full nature of how open you are about this stuff. But you did bring it up earlier. This all kind of came from a pirated stream of Art Bell, and that's actually how I found out about you. And if it wasn't for that pirated stream, I don't think that I would have ever got so into this as I did, because I was listening to that while I was doing other things, working, playing video games, you name it. I had that stream on, and that's where I accumulated a lot of the information that really got me into this, because as you know, Art Bell's show was an absolute intellectual platform. But let me ask you, how did you get away with that, Michael? How did you get away with that?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. I wonder if maybe that was just because I started that stream at the end of 2005, like December 2005. And so I just wonder maybe if at that time things were a little less restrictive. People weren't wound so tightly when it comes to controlling their content. I don't know. I mean, you would play the stream, and I had a what they call on a Shoutcast stream, you can have what's called an intro file. So that as soon as somebody launches the stream, they hear whatever file it is you want them to hear, and then it goes into the content that's being played live. And what they would hear is a recording that would just, as soon as you'd press play on the stream, you'd hear GeorgeNorrieSucks.com with some sound effects in the background, and then the stream would play. And then between every individual show would be another advertisement for the stream. And I don't doubt that that's how you found the forum, because you were among some of the very first members of the forum, and I only found that out maybe a couple months back. You said that you had been there since 2008, and I think maybe May of 2008 was when you signed up, something like that. I mean, just maybe a month or two after the forum opened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, I went in there, and you're talking about the George Norrie Sucks forum on the stream, and I actually found out about the stream from another friend who sent it to me and said, hey, look, you can listen to Art Bell all the time if you listen to this. And from there, I found George Norrie Sucks, and as soon as I saw that, I immediately just started laughing. I mean, just imagine what's going through my head. I'm just like, oh my God, this guy, he has so much balls to even do that at all. One thing that I think that I enjoy the most about it is the sense of humor. I think that like you said, a lot of people, they're so afraid of being politically correct, and they're so afraid of offending people. And I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the guy that's kowtowing or catering to people. I loved how Art Bell, he'd say, turn your radio down when they call it. I love when he'd go off on people. I think that makes a person so much more interesting. But, back to I suppose what I want to ask a little bit about is, I know that Art Bell kind of, in a way, sort of gave you permission to do what you were doing. Is that correct?
No, he can't. He doesn't own any of that content. Premier Radio Networks owns all of it, going back to the beginning. I mean, when they bought the show, they owned the show going forward and what had already aired. So, no, he never gave any permission. He never had any right to give any permission. He certainly didn't do anything to impede it, though. And, my reasons for doing that stream were not entirely altruistic. I really, the real reason I did the stream, at first it was just to drive traffic to my website. But, when people say I was the first to do this or I was the first to do that, oftentimes what they're saying is bullcrap. And to say that I was the first to do something, I would usually hold off from saying that because I would really not be entirely confident that that's the case. But I'm pretty positive that I was the very first person to run any sort of an Art Bell stream, because I've been using Shoutcast for various things for many years, going back to the late 90s, back when Winamp was owned by Nullsoft and that whole crew. And so I've been a Shoutcast user and occasional broadcaster going back to the late 90s, around 2000 or so. And there was never an Art Bell stream on there at all. Never. Not once. I never saw anything. And so I had this entire Art Bell collection. I saw people running Phil Hendry streams. I think there were Howard Stern streams. There were Opie and Anthony streams. And I just thought, holy crap, I cannot believe that nobody is running an Art Bell stream. So I did it. And it turned out to be one of the most successful streams on Shoutcast. It was regularly among the top of the talk streams. If you arranged them by genre and look at how many people, I think it would peak out every night at like 650 cumulative listeners. So, like, if you would take a snapshot at some point in the night, there would be 650 plus people listening all at the same time. Now, that doesn't take into account the people who've come and gone over the course of, say, an evening. That number would be much, much higher. Like when you're broadcasting and someone says, how many listeners did you have tonight? And you look at the Shoutcast stats and it says whatever it says, well, that's not really how many listeners you had. You had far more than that. It's just that at that snapshot of time when you looked, that's how many people happened to be connected concurrently. It was a really popular stream. And but as I said, my reasons were not entirely altruistic. I wanted to drive traffic to my website. And then later on, in 2006, when I started podcasting, I wanted to have an audience. I mean, I'm a nobody. Nobody knows who I am, and there's no reason that anybody is going to just – I mean, yeah, some people are going to find you. If you're doing something that's listenable, that's any good at all, okay, some people are going to find you. But if you're a nobody and nobody's ever heard of you, it's going to take a really long time to build up any kind of an audience. Like, if you look at all the most successful podcasts out there, they're all hosted by people who already were famous in some way. So they've got that going for them. They just carry their gravitas from whatever it was they were doing into podcasting. So I had to have some way to generate an audience. And so what my real reason for running the stream became was just so that there would be somebody there to hear me when I'm doing my stream, when I'm doing my show. And oh my God, you wouldn't believe some of the angry messages I'd get whenever I would shut Art off and start doing my podcast. I mean, we're just talking about like a little 2-hour podcast once a week. And oh my God, it enraged some people. Some people liked it. But, man, there were a lot of people that were just so enraged and incensed by what I was doing, and I definitely heard about it. But yeah, it wasn't entirely a charity operation. There was definitely some self-interest.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think was most beneficial was, and I know this because I would hear a show on that stream and I'd go and look for it. It was just nowhere to be found. You were actually collecting and filing away and keeping these old shows that like nobody else even had. They're impossible to find. If you weren't providing them, they simply would not be provided to anybody at any point, period.
Yeah, I think a lot of those shows, if you go look at the Art Bell torrent, I forget what it's actually called, but there's like an Art Bell mega torrent out there with just, you probably know what I'm talking about. It's got gigabytes and gigabytes of Art Bell content. And I think some of those shows were actually recorded off of my stream because I have heard like that U7 radio, I don't know if that still is in operation or not, but occasionally you'd be listening to U7 radio and a new show would start and you'd hear one of the liners that I used to play on my old Art Bell stream.
Oh my God.
I know that at least either the U7 guy was recording my stream and that's how he was getting some of his shows, or whatever torrent he downloaded shows from, that's how that person got the shows. It was pretty funny. I'd be listening. There was some commercial I made with my wife where I told her she sounds like an Asian prostitute. I can't even remember why I said that to her in the commercial, but I ended up hearing that on U7 radio one day, something I recorded with my wife back in 2009. It was hilarious.
Yeah, like anything else, if something has any sort of following, you immediately have tons of people copying. Now there's, a dozen or so different people running old Art Bells, but they definitely don't have access to the same content. And I have to wonder if, this is why Art Bell never expressed any anger towards what you're doing, because he kind of saw that you were providing these old shows to, people that might be young people like myself at the time that otherwise they just would never have heard him and the great work that he has done.
Well, I think it's possible that you could be right about that. And it could also be that he knew that since he didn't own those shows, Premier Radio did, and he had a beef with them. It could be that he viewed that as a thumb in their eye. And so that's why he didn't necessarily complain about it too much. I don't know. I asked him about that once, and the answer he gave me was kind of, I don't remember exactly what he said. I think it was something along the lines of, well, it's not my content, and I didn't really have any vested interest in whether anybody was pirating it or not. And I think, really, if you look at Art's origins in radio, he, I think, ran a pirate FM station in Okinawa, and he kind of has some origins in that regard. So it's maybe something he might tip his hat to, even.
Yeah, possibly. Now, in your opinion, what exactly is it that makes Bellgab so addicting? Because I admit that I've been spending more time on there, and I'm getting a little bit more addicted to it. Certainly, there's a very loyal community there. What's the secret behind Bellgab? Why is it so addicting?
I don't know, because if I knew that, I'd start 10 other forums just like it. I mean, I really don't know. I think if I were to put my finger on one thing, it would be, not to pat myself on the back, but I really do try and stay out of everybody's way. If somebody posts something they're not supposed to, I try and just delete it, and I don't even hassle them about it. I think it was yesterday, somebody, King of Kings had that thread where he was, some guy got punched at this rally on Inauguration Day, and King of Kings started a thread about the guy who punched him, and it turned out that the guy goes to dominatrixes or something. He's some kind of a nut who apparently likes to eat feces.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's a strange fella. And one of the pictures had a sex toy in it. Well, I've got to delete that, primarily because, first and foremost, Google AdSense is going to complain if I leave imagery of sex toys on the forum. I just can't have that. And since AdSense is the primary mechanism by which the forum makes any money, I have to adhere to that. And but the second reason is that I want people to be able to read the forum anytime, anywhere, without having to worry about what imagery is going to come across the screen and who might happen to be looking over the shoulder as they see that. And so that's why I don't allow images that aren't safe for work. But short of that, I don't really meddle too much at all. I try not to in what people are saying, what they're doing, unless someone is just deliberately going around making it a horrible experience for everybody. And then eventually I'll just reach a limit. It's sort of like, was it Chief Justice Earl Warren who said, I don't know how you define pornography, but I know it when I see it. Well, you don't really know how to define when a user needs to go, but you know it when you see it. You know, it's just when someone is just making life hell for everybody and doing it for the purpose, just for the sake of doing it, you know it when you see it. And but anyway, for instance, that image I just talked about in the King of Kings thread, I just deleted it and went on about my business. I didn't send anybody a message admonishing them or anything like that. I didn't put a message in the thread so everybody can see someone got in trouble here. You know, it's a pretty freewheeling type of place, and I think that probably is the primary ingredient in terms of what makes it work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do have just a small bit of experience. I ran my own forum for a number of years. Totally different topic. It was about MMA and wrestling and stuff like that. But one thing that I wish that I would have always done from the beginning was handle it just the way that you handle Bellgab, where you don't get mixed up in stuff. You don't take things personal. I don't see you going on there and having flame wars with people or banning people or anything like that. That really is the secret, is the free speech that you allow on that place. It's really amazing that you're able to put up with all of that.
Well, I'm not infallible. I'll say that I've made my mistakes. And there have been times that I allowed myself to get personally affected by things that people said to me, and my administrative approach was guided by that when it shouldn't have been. So I've made my mistakes, but you learn from those as you go along, and you learn what advice not to listen to also. Like when you're running a forum, you'll have lots of people that think they know better than you what ought to be deleted, what ought to be allowed, what ought not to be allowed. What ought not be allowed. I think I'd rather say it that way. But you just have to learn not to listen to those people, because everyone has an opinion on how it ought to be run, but they really can't see things from your perspective because you're juggling a lot of different balls in the course of running a forum. And eventually you just have to realize that it's best not to juggle any of those balls at all. Just set them down and let the thing organically exist as it wants to exist. And that's what I've tried to do. But no, I understand exactly what you're talking about. I have plenty of regrets in terms of how I've run the forum. There have been people I've banned in the past that I regret having banned that should never have been banned. The first one that comes to mind is that Bart L. guy. He should never have been banned. He got banned. But, that was an occasion where I allowed my personal feelings to affect the administration of the forum. Big mistake.
And you've actually gone as far as to kind of do a special event a few times where you just unbanned everybody, right?
Yeah, I think I've had 3 unbannings. They've been referred to by the users of the forum as the Great Unbanning, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, where I open up the entire ban list and I just clear it out. Even with spammers, I just get rid of the whole thing and start fresh with a new slate. And but there are certain people that's not going to happen for. I mean, there are people who've done things that are just so egregious that they just cannot be unbanned. And if I ever found that they were using the forum under a different name, I would have to ban them again. But that's extremely rare. I can only think of 2 or 3 people who fall into that category out of thousands.
Sure, that's completely understandable because you always have some people that just take things too far. They post people's personal information or make threats of physical violence and stuff like that. And there is a limit. Of course, you seem to have a lot more patience than most other people out there. But let me kind of move on from this topic. I'm dying to know this. What are your favorite Bellgab moments of all time?
Geez, that's it caught me off guard. I think the run up to Dark Matter back in 2013 would be one of them. And then, you know what? I think perhaps, when Bellgab started as GeorgeNorrieSucks.com or later as CoastGab and eventually became Bellgab, whatever phase you're talking about, there was always this sort of tinge of curiosity as to whether Art is aware of the forum. Does Art read the forum? Does he know it exists? Does George Norrie read the forum? Does he know it exists? I mean, this was a thought that occupied the minds of a lot of people who were around this place for a few years, and to go from that to a night where George and Art were arguing with each other in the same thread back and forth. That was sort of a moment where the universe exploded. It just was like to go from installing this script on a server and wondering, do these people know about this? Do these people know it exists? To finally evolving into this moment where George Norrie and Art Bell are in a thread arguing and calling each other assholes. That I'd say that might be one of my big moments, actually.
Oh man, that is just too funny.
Well, because it sort of encapsulates so much stuff in one moment. It's like the culmination of so many things right there. Here they are on this stupid forum that I started. These two guys going back and forth with each other. We're wondering, do they know the forum exists? We go from that to here they are calling each other cunts. I mean, it was really, they didn't really call each other that, but that was the general mood of it all.
Oh my God. Yeah. I would have never even knew that those guys had any beef because, Art would go on the weekends, he'd do the show and they'd have good things to say about each other. But no, that's not the case. These guys, they got a beef going on. I don't know if it's the way George conducts himself, if Art views him kind of like a snake or something like that. He does give off that vibe sometimes. I've made it very clear I am an Art Bell guy. When my former co-host was getting all excited about Norrie, I was never okay with that. I always hated that. I don't like George Norrie. I'll just go right ahead and say it. I'm not a fan of his, but I think that's pretty amazing that both of those guys actually would take part in your community. It gives it so much more validity, and it's really turned it into an epicenter of the paranormal radio world.
Well, something, you're right in what you said, that for so long there were no negative exchanges, nothing Art said over a span of many years ever questioned George or his legitimacy or his approach to anything until, if you go to YouTube and you search for Art Bell, George Norrie ham radio, you'll find a video. It's actually on my YouTube channel. It's got about 105,000 views. That'll help you find it. And this is an audio file that I found like probably 10 years ago, maybe more, on some file sharing thing called Kazaa, or maybe it was Morpheus. There were several of those peer-to-peer sharing things at one time. And I was looking for Art Bell shows, and I happened to stumble upon this recording of Art Bell talking about George Norrie on his ham radio. And he was lamenting the fact that George was going to move from St. Louis to L.A. to do the show because, as Art said, every goddamn show anybody does comes out of L.A. or New York. It's the same thing. You're going to be right up there with your nose in the suits, assholes, with them telling you how to run your show, how to conduct your business. It doesn't do good things for you. It doesn't do good things for the show. I don't know why George is moving to L.A. Maybe he just wants to schmooze. He wants to be a part of that scene. I don't know. But that audio marked, for me, the first crack where I had come across some indicator that Art was anything but deferential toward and pleased by George.
Yeah, I do distinctly remember that particular tape coming on the the stream every so once in a while, and I remember just sitting there listening. I'm thinking, what is this? This is different. It's just kind of off the cuff, and yeah, sure enough, it seems that Art early on he did not like that. I think he called it the LA influence, the faith healers, and the type of people that were coming on the show was changing, and as many people have said, it probably had a lot to do with George just not having that same passion there. I don't see him as somebody that's a true seeker or somebody that's really looking for those answers.
No, I think George is somebody who kind of views radio as a bastard stepchild of the entertainment business, but it's what he can get, so he'll take it, but he really wants to do something more. And if you look at George's attempts at television pursuits, like that horrible Gaiam TV thing that he does, or several years ago, George did this predictions thing where he had Ed Dames and a bunch of other idiots who really have no abilities whatsoever, and they try to get together and predict a bunch of crap, and none of it came true. None of it. Not a single prediction in that show came true. And it's always the same stuff. The year 2007 is going to bring famine. World disease is going to conquer human evolution, and the human race will succumb like never seen before. You know, it's all the same type of approach to predicting. It always is. And none of it came true. But George has always had these designs on becoming something more than just a talk radio host, which, frankly, I think he should be really thankful just to be doing that. And by the way, I sent you that video in your Skype, so maybe if you wanted to, after the show's over, or maybe after I'm gone, or whatever you want to do, you could maybe play it on your stream and people could hear what it is we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, certainly. That definitely, yeah. Yeah, the thing with George is, you know what really bothered me was, I kind of was okay with him, even when people were being brutal towards him, but then he starts taking these shots at Art, and I'm sure you know the comment about, he's winding down, folks, he's winding down. I just can't put up with that. It's so disrespectful. Without Art, I wouldn't be here. None of us would be here. Nobody would be doing shows like this. He's the godfather of all of this. And a lot of people have valid points, and I don't disagree with the criticism of his flakiness or anything like that, but I get bothered when people disrespect Art.
Well, one thing I will say is that I think Art launched the first public salvos at George. I never really saw George say anything negative about Art. Now, George may have behaved and he may have employed some passive-aggressive tactics, like, for instance, having who's the reverse? David John Oates on his show, who is the guy that did the reverse speech. Art used to have him on his show a lot.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I think the way the whole beef between David John Oates and Art, I think the way that started was David John Oates was on Art's show one night. Art was not impressed at all with the clips that he was playing, and Art went ahead and ended the interview. And after that, David John Oates went out and started reverse speech analyzing Art Bell. And I don't recall what specifically it was that David John Oates alleged that was based on whatever reverse speech clips he had of Art, but I think it was in some way related to, do you remember there was this radio station, it was like a shortwave station in Tennessee, and someone went on that station and, of course, falsely accused Art Bell of having been arrested for child molestation in the 1970s?
I do remember something to that effect. I know about the thing with the Philippines, and I do distinctly remember there being 2 or 3 other times when Art came under these incredibly strange and very slanderous attacks from individuals. Who knows what was going on there? But yeah, very disturbing. Very disturbing.
Yeah, well, I think that thing that happened on that shortwave station was in some way connected to David John Oates, if I understand it correctly. And Oates eventually got sued, and it was a really nasty thing. He was banned from coast to coast for many years. And then out of nowhere, I think it was in the run-up to Midnight in the Desert, or maybe it was the run-up to Dark Matter. I don't know. I can't keep them straight at this point. But out of nowhere, oh, hey, guess who's a guest on Coast to Coast AM? It's David John Oates. That's the kind of stuff that George did, but Art was out there giving interviews, calling George, saying that the paranormal genre deserves better, and really launching some serious salvos that I never saw George launch his way. So, yeah, I mean, neither side is without its faults. I'll just put it that way.
I think that's a very fair assessment. But let me move on just a little bit from Art and George. And I know a lot of people are going to want to know your thoughts on this. How do you feel about the current situation with Heather Wade?
Well, which situation?
Well, she's very, obviously very new to radio. I've listened to her myself, and personally, I don't think she's that bad. But people are simply not happy with this situation. They're not happy.
Well, I mean, I understand why they're unhappy, and it wouldn't have mattered who took over after Art left when everything went south during Midnight in the Desert. It would not have mattered who sat in that chair. Everybody was going to be upset by it. But so from that perspective, I totally cut her a lot of slack, and I actually respect the balls that she had to step in and begin hosting that show. The problem I have is I just think it's dishonest radio. You, as somebody who listened to Howard Stern for many years, I, as somebody who listened to Opie and Anthony for many years, you and I surely are both people who respect honest radio, where a host gives a really honest take on what's happening in his own life, what's happening with the show, what they think about other people. And so when I listen to someone like Heather Wade and what she's doing, thinking back on how closely connected she is to Bellgab as a website, as an entity, as a community, and the fact that she won't even, and the fact that she would never have made any form of contact with Art Bell had it not been for her association with Bellgab, and more specifically, her appearances on the forum's official podcast, known as the Gabcast, she would never have even had the opportunity to contact Art Bell, let alone go to his house and sit down and record an interview with him, eventually become his producer, eventually take over the show when he quits. None of that would have happened. Yet, here she is hosting this show, and she can't even mention the existence of Bellgab. I doubt that word has left her mouth once in the course of her hosting that show. Now, that to me is just patently dishonest, and it's chicken shit. And I don't like dishonest chicken shit radio. And that's the kind of radio I think she's doing. I think it's unnecessarily protective, and I think it's unnecessarily risk averse. It's as if there's something to be lost by mentioning what somebody listening to your show might go out and read one of your Bellgab posts. Oh God! I mean, don't be such a chicken shit. Quit masquerading as though you have a thick skin and you're brave in some way when your every action indicates otherwise. This is how I feel about the show.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I haven't listened to Heather enough to know that she hasn't ever embraced Bellgab, but yeah, that sounds a little strange, because right now, in my opinion, what Heather should be doing is she should be facing this stuff head on. And if I was her, I would get on there every day, and not to defend herself, but just say, look, I'm here. I'm not afraid of the criticisms, And you know what? Maybe she might even hear something or read something that actually helps her program evolve a little bit. So I agree. That's definitely the wrong approach.
Well, if you're going to go out and try and present yourself as being courageous, then your actions need to reflect that. And pretending that a forum where you posted...
Hey.
How about now?
I can hear you perfect. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I had to restart my whole system. I don't know what happened here.
Yeah, I have no idea. I went ahead and I restarted Skype, but I think until I can, I hate to disappoint everybody, but until I can get this issue fixed and make sure that it's working correctly, probably just hold off on the calls for now. And I have plenty more questions for you, so if it's all right with you, I'll just continue on for the next 20 minutes or so, and then we'll part ways, and I'll let you get back to your evening.
Well, I've got this I've got 3 external audio devices that I use with my system here, so I'm not using the sound card that's built into the computer. And one of them actually, I think it is the one that's responsible for me being able to talk to you right now. It actually powered off, so that was on my end. But I will tell you that if you're taking calls on the same Skype that you're talking to me on, if you just answer them, it'll put me on hold. You have to right-click on the call, or you have to click a little drop-down menu and say Add to Conference. It's a real pain in the butt. That's why I have a separate Skype for callers, and I have another one for whatever co-host I happen to be on with, and each of those Skypes is using a totally separate sound card.
Oh, I see. Do you actually have other computers plugged in then? Is that how you do it?
No, I have one computer for everything. I just have multiple sound cards.
Oh, I see. Wow.
Yeah, so I have one sound card for the callers, one sound card for my co-host, and another sound card for any music or whatever else I play, and that one also records the show. And then I have a separate netbook that I use for actually sending my stream when I'm doing a show live out to the Shoutcast host. But that's all that netbook does.
Well, I can kind of take a little bit of a guess. But once again, I apologize to you guys for not taking your calls tonight. It was definitely in the plans. Hopefully we'll be able to do it again someday and do a better job. But let me just take an educated guess at what some of you might have wanted to call in and ask about. Michael, who is this George Sando? Where did he come from, and how did he rise in popularity?
Well, I don't know. I mean, he just started out as some random user who joined Bellgab. I didn't know anything about him. I'd never seen him, heard of him, nothing. But he would post incessantly. I mean, he just, with these walls of text, and what he would do, he would try to talk about articles he had read on other websites. And what he would do is he would go to the website, do a Control-A on his keyboard to highlight every element of the web page, and then go back to the Bellgab window where you post your message and do Control-V to post all of that into so you'd see all the little sidebar doodads and the menu buttons and all this horrible crap instead of just the text of whatever article it was that he wanted to reference. And he did this repeatedly, and it's any normal person could see that the way they're going about this doesn't appear to be working out that well. But that was my introduction to him. And eventually I was able to make him understand that you can't go about it that way. It took a long time to get that to sink through his head. But eventually I did. And shortly after he began using the forum, people from his past began following him onto Bellgab. I guess people from his old SF Redbook days, which was a website where you could hook up with prostitutes. And he was apparently a big-time user of that website. And it got pretty intense. It was something that I wasn't accustomed to on Bellgab, that level of trolling. And so I eventually just shut down the George Senda thread, the Falke 2013 thread, and I banned him. And the reason I did that was to protect him. It wasn't punitive in any way. It was just, here's a guy who obviously is out of his element when it comes to knowing how to handle all of this, how to deal with all of this. He's not doing himself any favors with anything he posts, and he doesn't understand how to make this stop. So to protect him, I closed the thread down and banned him, and that was the end of that. And I'm sure he was upset by that. I could understand why he would be upset by that. but that's only because he doesn't have the capacity to really, truly understand why I did it. Well, about a year later, I came to find that in his YouTube videos that he posts about 7 of per day, he was repeatedly attacking Bellgab and attacking me for what I had done. And so I thought, okay, well, this guy apparently doesn't understand why I did what I did, and he apparently wants to rumble, so to hell with him. I opened the thread back up, and I unbanned him, and I opened up the spigot, and I thought, well, okay, if he's not going to appreciate the favor I did him, and I did him a favor, if he's not going to understand that, comprehend it, and appreciate it, then fine. I'm going to just let the spigot open up, let it flow, and let things organically manifest as they will.
Yeah, I have to admit, I've been very confused about the George Senda thing pretty much since the beginning. Originally I thought that this was like a pro wrestling thing where this guy, he's putting on an act, he's generating interest in himself and whatever he's doing. But I've actually come to find that this is not an act. This isn't a guy doing this on purpose. This is really him. Everything that's happening is 100% authentic.
Yeah, I've not often, but in the past I've remarked how hilarious it would be if it turned out he's actually a regular guy who is an executive at a Fortune 500 company and has a family, and this is just like some sort of performance art. Like he leaves his family for several hours a day and goes to this shitty apartment that he rented out in Martinez, California, that he made to look like a hoarder hovel. This is what he does, and then at the end of it all, he goes back home to his family in a giant mansion made of bricks on a cul-de-sac. But alas, I think that reality is far simpler than that.
And he seems to have gotten it into his head that somehow you sent him a laptop that is embedded with a virus so that you could collect naked pictures of him?
Yeah, all I did was I sent him a laptop because he wanted to podcast on ufoship.com, which is my podcast website. I wanted him to have a podcast on there, not because I'm such a nice guy necessarily, but because I knew it would get lots of listeners, and that's what I want. I want podcasts on my website that get lots of listeners. And that's why I have that guitar podcast, the Fret Files with Eric Daw. That podcast, when you look at what it's surrounded by, seems so left field that you're like, why is there a guitar podcast on ufoship.com? It's like, what? But I knew that podcast is so niche, it is so specific to what it addresses, that it's going to get a lot of listeners, and I think it is the most heavily listened podcast on that entire website.
Really?
Yes, absolutely, and I knew it would be, and that's why I wanted it on there. I didn't care how well it fit in with what it was surrounded by. That's got nothing to do with anything in my mind. And
yeah,
so
that's actually really cool, because I'm a guitar player myself, and it's just so relevant. But one thing that I've noticed that you're actually doing is not only have you played a big part in making this archive of Art Bell programs available, but it seems like now what you're doing is you're helping a lot of people get started in paranormal radio.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much help I've really been necessarily. I get the message frequently from people, hey, how do I do a podcast? And when I get that question, there was a time when I was a far more enthusiastic person than I now am. I think I've become really jaded in a lot of ways relative to what my attitude used to be. And so when I would get that question, I'd say, well, what you need to do is you need to get a mixer that's capable of mix minus. And then what you're going to have to, and I'd sit here and hammer out 7 paragraphs of information explaining how it is you can go about setting up a podcast. And eventually it got to the point where somebody asks me that question, and I'm just like, yeah, you might want to just Google that. I don't know. There are a lot of ways to do it. And really these days, the reason I feel that way is because I can think of so many times I've given people good advice. I sit there and I make a real concerted effort to help somebody understand how to set all this up, and then you never hear another word from them. They never end up doing a podcast. They don't even thank you for all the time you spent sitting there typing that out for them. So now when I get that question, I just I puke in the back of my throat just a little bit, and I go on about my business. I can't even be bothered. So I appreciate your perception of me that I'm helping people, but I'm not so sure how accurate that necessarily is.
Well, part of it is also because of what you're allowing other people to do. You're allowing pretty much anybody that has a program to come onto your forum, Bellgab, which is already established, already has thousands and thousands of people, and you're letting people promote themselves, and that is really big of you, because 99.9% of the people out there, including probably myself, would not allow that, because it's not my thing. But you're actually letting Bellgab become an epicenter of the future of paranormal radio, and that is a much bigger thing than I think even you might realize.
Well, I hadn't realized that, so I may have stumbled into brilliance. You're right. I may have stumbled right into it, but it wasn't necessarily a conscious effort on my part. I have a very open source mindset in terms of how this stuff ought to work. And so I just feel like if someone comes into the forum and they want to plug their radio show, their podcast, whatever, as long as they are a real human being and it's not a bot doing it, I really don't care. And frankly, I think that engenders a lot of goodwill, and just that act alone is going to cause those people to come back and perhaps to reference the forum to their own listeners in the future. And so the whole thing is this multi-tentacled beast that sort of grows on itself. You just get out of the way, let things happen as they will, and it's all going to be fine. I mean, nothing is really... See, when you're... I like that axiom. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so when you're running a forum, everything... Initially, when you're new to running a forum, everything you come upon, your brain goes through this flowchart. Is this acceptable? Am I going to allow this on the forum? What should I do anything? And if so, what is that? You know, the wheels start turning in your mind, and eventually, as you mature as somebody running a forum, you just come to this understanding that you need to be just open source and allow things to happen organically as they will, and it does ultimately keep everything going and keep everything alive. I mean, there have been so many reasons why Bellgab should have died in the past, whether it's Art quitting or quitting again or whatever. I mean, there have been a lot of events that should have signaled the end of Bellgab, and that the end of Bellgab has been predicted many times. But if you look at the stats, you'll see that actually there were more page views, I think, in January of there were more page views in December of 2016, I think you can go look at this yourself, than there were while Art Bell was on the air. So Bellgab's not going anywhere.
Yeah, what I like about that is that, let's say you're a podcaster, somebody like myself, but somebody just starting. If you're able to go on Bellgab and make a thread, you're going to get feedback from people that have been deep into the world of paranormal programming for a very long time, and that's really a valuable resource for anybody to get started, and anybody to, all you have to do is make a thread, and you're guaranteed, 5-10 people are going to listen to your show, and that makes all the difference in the world if you're starting with nothing.
Well, to allow that to happen, not only is it a service to the person who's doing the show that wants to get a little promotion for free, but it's also a service to the people who use Bellgab, because it makes them aware of content out there that they might otherwise not have been aware of. I'm sure there are podcasts that people hearing your show right now, I'm sure there are podcasts that they listen to regularly that they otherwise wouldn't have known about had they not seen it on Bellgab.com, had they not been apprised of its existence through Bellgab. So who is a forum administrator to determine for everyone using the forum what they should be exposed to and what they shouldn't be?
Yeah, very well said. And now, we all know that you are a longtime listener of Art Bell and one of his greatest fans, but are there any other paranormal programs? They don't have to be podcasts, but is there anything else out there that you would kind of not really put your stamp on, but say, hey, if you guys want to listen to something decent, go listen to this person?
No.
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 Okay.
I mean, I've said it before. I never really cared that much about the genre. The thing I always liked about, I don't know what it is about the paranormal, but there are a billion paranormal podcasts out there, and almost without deviation, every one of them is audio melatonin. I mean, you really, if you're having trouble sleeping, if you're about to lose your home to the IRS, go listen to one of those podcasts, and you're going to be asleep before the counter even reaches 60 seconds. I mean, there's so much horrible stuff out there, and not even in the world of podcasts. I mean, there was other paranormal content out there even when Art was doing what he was doing back in the classic Art Bell era. You'd see TV shows, various documentaries, but somehow those people always managed to turn something that should otherwise be really interesting into a complete snooze fest. And so that was one of the things I always liked about Art, was he managed to make things really exciting where otherwise I'm pretty confident other people would have just done nothing with it, and it would have been a boring experience to listen to it. And but I've long said that I mean, when you asked me earlier about the paranormal, my interest in the paranormal is very specific to ghosts, the afterlife, is there life after death? But beyond that, I'm not really too terribly taken by the genre. And so I don't really care to hear it discussed I don't really care to hear the topic dissected if Art Bell isn't the host.
Yeah, he did have a certain charisma. I remember two things that just come to my mind right away. The first thing is when Art Bell, he would always talk about how much red eyes would scare him, and that would make me laugh so much. And the second thing was, this actually happened when I was listening to your stream. It was many, many years after it was originally aired. I don't know, 10, 15 years, and I think I was just playing a World of Warcraft or something like that, and I heard the show come on where his wife just died, and God, the fact that he would go on, get in front of a mic and be open about that, it just says so much about his character and his ability to stay interesting on the mic. But really, he was just being himself. He was being real, and I was brought to tears listening to that. Yeah, I was brought to tears. It just was so heartbreaking hearing that and hearing that emotion that he was pouring through the mic.
See, when you asked me earlier about Heather Wade, and I talk about how you and I, you were a Howard listener, I've been an Opie and Anthony listener. Honest radio is at the core of what makes something listenable. And what you referenced with that show, when Art came on and talked explicitly about the death of his wife, that is brutally honest radio. And it's compelling, and it's what people want in radio. They don't want someone who's protective and won't mention this and won't mention that, and someone who discards huge swaths of their history. And it's just that's honesty, and that's what people like, want, expect, demand, and appreciate in a radio host. Yeah,
absolutely. One of my questions, and I don't even have to ask it now, was what are your thoughts on the secret to being good on radio? And I think you just answered that question. I want everybody out there to know that I'm really trying to put myself over in that way. I want to be the honest guy. I don't want to be this guy that's sucking up to everybody, is nice to every caller. Maybe I come off as a complete asshole sometimes, but that's really how I want to come across. You said Art could be a little bit of an asshole sometimes. So could Howard Stern. Art Bell and Howard Stern, those are my idols. Those are my heroes. And that's why I'm not going to suck up to every person that calls in. If somebody's being a douchebag, I'm going to say, hey, you're a douchebag.
Right. Well, the sooner you acknowledge and understand that not everybody's going to like you, it's so liberating. You know, it's just. I mean, there are people in life, and you know them in your day-to-day life, who are just consumed with whether they're liked by everybody. I mean, go look at the people. If you're a Facebook user, I'm not, but anyone who is, go look at the average dreck that you see posted on Facebook by people in your life. They are so obviously consumed with what other people think of them. And the sooner you can get over that, the better. It's so liberating, particularly if you're going to do any form of a broadcast, whether it's traditional terrestrial radio or it's podcasting. The sooner you can get over this overriding concern of who likes you and all of that, it's just the better. It's very liberating. You'll do much better radio. And, I mean, it's... When I initially started podcasting, I had some of that. You know, I was a little... If someone disliked what I was doing, it affected me. And you eventually just... If your brain is wired in the right way, you'll get over that, and it's going to do really good things for you. You don't want to just be an asshole for the purpose of being an asshole.
Sure.
But at the same time, there does need to be an element of showmanship to what you're doing. And so, you know, the way you... I mean, I don't want to say that, like when I'm doing a podcast, I don't know, I'm trying to think, and I'll bet you that if you were to ask my friends about my personality, they would tell you that I'm pretty much the same way when I'm with them that I am when I'm doing a podcast. And it's not a conscious thing, it's just that something has been stripped away, the concern over how you're being perceived by the people that are listening to you. At some point melts away, and the real you kind of reveals itself. And so that's a good thing, yes. And, you know, a lot of people would look at Art's persona as somebody who could occasionally be a bit of an asshole and say, oh, well, that's a negative. He was able to overcome that because of this and this, but that's a negative. No, it's not. That's a good thing. I was always happy that he was so mean to people who would call in with their radio turned on, because he was speaking for me. You know, I'm listening, and I'm annoyed by that. He's reflecting my annoyance. He is articulating what I can't because I'm listening. You know, that's or the amazing Kreskin is on and flakes out on a promise to donate money if a UFO is seen over the skies of Las Vegas, and when he doesn't pony up the dough, Art calls him lame. He says lame, 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 and then hangs up on the guy. I mean, that's great.
Yeah,
it's not a fault to be a bit of an asshole, to be a little bit direct with people.
It's not a sadistic thing. It's having that credibility of people tuning in week after week or day after day and knowing that they're getting a real person who isn't going to sit there and, you know, suck up to certain people or anything like that. Well, let me move off this topic a little bit because we are getting low on time, but one of these topics that I feel is very important is the way that Art Bell left the radio. You know, his last go around, there was talk of a stalker. You know, this is obviously a sensitive topic, but there was talk of somebody stalking him, somebody actually showing up on his property. And this is something that my former co-host and I, we talked about this quite a bit, just trying to figure out what the heck was going on, whether Art is telling the truth or not. What do you think of all these people or what do you think of the idea in general that Art might be lying about what happened?
Well, I think that there was something going on, but I think Art, really, I think at the core of it, I think Art got into Midnight in the Desert and then realized he'd made a mistake. I think he likes the idea of being in radio. He likes the idea of telling people radio is in my blood. I've heard that repeated many, many times. But I think when he actually gets into the mechanics of doing it, like actually doing it, some of that appreciation he feels for it all begins to sort of melt away. And I don't think Art's somebody who likes to be obligated to things. And so when you're hosting a radio show 5 nights a week and you have almost 50 affiliates, or maybe over 50 affiliates, I think at the time he left Midnight in the Desert, that's an obligation. I mean, that is a big obligation. You have entirely connected yourself to something that you have to be committed to on a daily basis, and I think he liked the thought of that, but like in the run-up to Midnight in the Desert, he sort of poo-pooed the idea of there being terrestrial radio affiliates. But I always knew it was going to end up going in that direction. It had to. But he sort of poo-pooed the idea, and I think the reason he did was because he knew that that represented a real obligation that he couldn't just so easily walk away from. And it eventually ended up coming to pass that the show was carried on terrestrial radio, but apparently the way they had everything contracted out, it didn't harm him in any way, legally, financially, whatever, to walk away from it. He wasn't bound to it. As long as there was a show provided, I think that was all that was required. I don't even think that they had to continue airing a show. I think if they had just shut the whole thing down, I don't think there's anything punitive that the affiliates could have done. I don't think they were obligated to the affiliates in any way. I expect that they arranged things in such a way that they could come or go as necessary. But I think that's why he largely poo-pooed the idea of terrestrial affiliates as the run-up to Midnight in the Desert was happening. He didn't want that obligation. It was less of an obligation. He was less tied down if it were just an internet-only enterprise. He didn't have outside operators who were relying on him in any way. But it eventually came to pass that they were on terrestrial radio, and everybody knows the history of that. I just think that he got into Midnight in the Desert and realized that he didn't want to do it as badly as he thought he did, but he couldn't quite say that to people. He just couldn't bring himself to say, I just don't want to do this, you guys. And so, I mean, the signs were there. I mean, in the run-up to him quitting, we kept hearing little subtle hints about somebody calling, or maybe there was... You remember, I can't even remember the specifics of it all. My mind has fogged out on all of those. I just kind of, maybe it's a protective mechanism. I've just kind of blocked it all out at this point. But there kept being these little hints dropped that things were not all properly aligned in the Art Bell universe as it related to doing that show. And I think maybe as far as a couple months prior to his quitting the show, he began planting the seeds of possibility that this might not continue. And I don't remember what the first incident was, if it was the supposed firing of a gun in front of his house, or if it was a phone call placed to his home. I don't remember what the first incident was, but I remember when I saw that thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be the exit. Here we go. And that was a good month or two prior to his actual departure. And that's not to say he's lying about whatever it was that was going on around his home, but I think that perhaps I don't know, maybe he just perceived incorrectly, or maybe he was already wound tight because he knew he was doing a radio show and he just sort of expected somebody was going to mess with him, so any little thing that happened around his property, it just exponentially blew it up in his mind that much more. I don't know, but
yeah, one thing about
I don't think he was in any danger. I think he just didn't want to do a show.
Yeah, one thing about Art that comes to mind when you say that is he's been on the radio for a very long time, and people, I think, should realize that Art has made a lot of enemies. He has a lot of enemies. Maybe not that want to kill him, but, you know, over time, look at all these attacks that he's come under over the years.
Yeah, he has. There are definitely some people out there who have tried to make his life more difficult. But I'm just hard-pressed to believe that somebody was in front of his home firing a gun. I think that, I mean, I don't know the specifics of it, and I wasn't there. I think that Art believes something was going on, but I think that's because his sensitivity to any sort of external disruption was heightened by the fact that he was doing a show and he was almost expecting it. It's like if you walk into a house that you're told is haunted before you go into it, your antennas are up. You're almost expecting something to happen to you. So any little creak in the floor, any little sound that you hear that seems unexplainable, well, what are you going to attribute that to? Of course, your mind is going to say, "Ah, yes, here come the ghosts." You know, it's. I think it might have been something akin to that.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Unfortunately, the world just may never know. But we are reaching the end of our interview. And Michael, first of all, thank you so much for coming on this program. But I just want to go ahead and let you get on the soapbox if you'd like, and you can say anything that you want. You can plug anything you want. Feel free. The floor is completely yours.
Well, I don't really have much. I think we covered a lot. I really appreciate you asking me on the show, and thanks to everybody who listened. That's appreciated. And I really want to extend a big thank you to everybody who continues using Bellgab.com. That's really cool. When you go there and you realize that it has meaning to people and they get something out of it and it's a part of their day. I mean, that's really, you can boil it down to that. Bellgab is a part of the day for a lot of people. And that's something I have a lot of appreciation for. So to everybody who uses Bellgab, thank you.
And absolutely, well said. A big shout out to all the folks over there at Bellgab. And I had a great time tonight, and hopefully one day in the future we'll be able to sit down and do this again.
Well, I did too, and I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our paths will cross once more, no doubt. You have a good night, buddy.
Yeah, have a good night, Michael. Thank you again. Enjoy your evening. And there you have it. That was the famous Michael Vandeven, also known as MV. I hope that you guys had fun tonight. I hope that you were entertained. I hope that you learned a little bit more about MV than we knew before. And I definitely would love to talk to him again. I mean, I did have more questions here, and unfortunately, I just screwed up the calls. I'm not sure what happened there. The problem is when something like that happens, I mean, when I have a guest on the line, I don't want to sit there and troubleshoot a technical issue when they're there waiting and people are listening. So it's not that I didn't want to take the calls or I didn't want to shut you guys down or anything like that. I was just trying to do the smartest thing for the situation and just move on quickly instead of, oh, got to press this button. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, now something else went out. Oh, now nobody can hear me. That tends to be what happens when you're trying to troubleshoot something. But we will go ahead and take some calls when I come back from the break. I have some things I want to talk about. God, that was such a great interview that I'm kind of in awe. I mean, what MV has done, he's so humble. I don't know if he really realizes how much he's contributing to the world of paranormal radio. And I wanted to kind of tell him personally what he's doing or what I perceive that he's doing and how thankful we all are, us podcasters and us people that are trying to get started. But I had a great time. I'm going to go ahead and play you guys some music. And then when we come back, I'll open up the phone lines and there's a few things I want to talk about. So. Oh, I'm sorry, I turned my mic off. This song I'm about to play, this is called The War to End All Wars, and it is by Al. So let's go ahead and play that. And welcome back to End of Days Radio. This is Daniel. Welcome back, everybody. I hope that you are still listening. I know many of you just came to listen to Michael Vandeven /MV, and that's perfectly fine. Like I said, we're gonna keep most of the chit chat at the end of the show. That way, we have the guests up front for the people that want to hear the guests, and then we'll do our chit chatting and we'll take calls at the end of the program. Sorry I'm breathing so fast. I had to run outside and I don't have a bathroom in my studio garage here, so oftentimes I have to run behind the garage in order to use the potty. I actually thought about just keeping a big empty... I know this is disgusting, but I was thinking about keeping a big empty milk jug next to me while I'm doing the show. That way I could just kind of relieve myself if I've got a guest on or a good caller or something like that. I know that's totally gross, and I would definitely have some hand sanitizer or some baby wipes there too for those of you that are concerned about my health and safety. But we are going to go ahead and open up the line. So if you did want to call in, if you wanted to comment on that interview, if you want to ask me anything, if you want to talk about anything that's relevant in the world, feel free to go ahead and use this opportunity to call in. That number, once again, is 209-348-9810. That's how you can call in from your phone. Or you can just add Ninja Shoes 777 on Skype, and you can call me that way. That's the easiest way to do it. But I do have some things that I wanted to talk about. I'm introducing a new segment, and because I want to focus on the paranormal world just a little bit more closely, and many of you have probably noticed that I've already kind of started doing this, but I want to talk about what sort of paranormal news is going on. I know this isn't super original. I know that everybody does this, but I do think it's a good idea because what is different is you're going to hear my perspective on whatever news story this is. And if you want to comment on anything I'm talking about, you can. But let's go ahead and get started. This first article is from a website, inverse.com, and the news story is Uri Geller actually convinced the CIA he had paranormal powers in 1973. So the big news here isn't that. The big news is actually that the CIA recently released 11 million pages of previously.
From what I can tell, the site was hacked by the Hackback movement and Anonymous. The site may be back up by the time you watch this
What
video,
the hell is
but
that?
just in case it isn't, I went into the Internet Archives and pulled a cached copy
What the hell is
of
that?
what the website normally looks like. Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I opened up a news article and it started automatically playing. Another one of those friggin' noob mistakes that I hate. There's so many of them tonight. I do apologize, but let me get back to what I was talking about. So the big news is that the CIA, they released all of these previously declassified documents. What's really weird about it is that the CIA actually said something about UFOs and aliens, but I'll get to that in a sec. But apparently there were some experiments done at SRI, and Uri Geller actually took part in these very legitimate tests, and he was able to prove to these guys that he had some legitimate paranormal powers. I'm sure all of you guys know who Uri Geller is. He's one of the most famous psychics or guys that had any sort of paranormal, telepathic, telekinetic powers. He's one of the more famous ones, and he was actually able to convince a completely unbiased panel that he had these powers. I don't know if he used some sleight of hand or he was using some mentalist tricks or what, but it seemed to work on these people back in 1979. I don't know if he'd still be able to do it nowadays. I've said many times before that I completely agree that psychic abilities are a very real thing. I do believe that it is a natural part of our, I want to say evolution, but I'm not sure if that's the correct way to put it, because I know that in the past, people had abilities like this. I don't know. I'm taking an educated guess. I'm thinking back in the caveman days is probably when we last had these abilities. I think that part of the reason why we don't have them now is because of the first thing might be the fact that our genetics aren't as strong as they used to be. We have a lot of genetic diseases, humans do. So maybe over time our genetics have become very degraded. That's one theory. Another one might be that there are a lot of things in our environment that are blocking these capabilities. I'm sure you guys have heard the stuff about how we all walk around with calcified pineal glands. I've even had people come on this show and tell me that they've been able to look at their own pineal gland or one of another person, and in fact it was completely covered with these crusty sort of crystal things. And if there is a psychic ability, if there is telepathy, it probably works on that part of the brain. That's the same part of the brain that drugs work on, high-powered psychedelic drugs. And a lot of people have these experiences while they are on psychedelic drugs. I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. You're thinking that they're just so high that they're imagining that they're having a psychic experience. No, that's not the case. And if you ask me, that's probably the reason why a lot of these drugs like LSD and DMT and things like that are illegal, because they don't want people doing their own experiments in their own home or their basement or anything like that. And the third theory is that maybe we just haven't reached that stage of evolution yet. Maybe people in the past did not have psychic powers, and we are evolving into having them. So there might be parties out there, there might be groups that have an interest in suppressing this ability, because who knows, maybe we would be able to see the aliens, or we would be aware of other dimensions, or we would be united in a way that nationalism can't control, that countries and governments can't control. We would actually have access to the real internet, the internet of people that everybody. We'd be in the internet of everybody, not just on this planet, but maybe even people that are on other planets. So it's just a possibility. I do personally believe that psychic abilities are very real. I've had many of them myself. That's really where my belief comes from. And I think that we are in a very important time right now. And this is a part of the reason why this show even exists, because I really want people to become more aware of this stuff. I know that it's very hard to swallow. It's very hard to believe, but everybody has had something happen, a moment of intuition, a prophetic dream. Twins oftentimes can feel each other's pains. A mother can oftentimes know when her children are in stress or in danger. There's a very strong connection between child and mother. There's even, if you guys are into Terrence McKenna stuff, there's even entire tribes that use this drug, ayahuasca, to communicate with each other telepathically. That happens in South America. I don't know if that's true or not. I've never actually been there. But there does seem to be just an overwhelming amount of evidence that psychic powers are indeed real. You have the government's remote viewing program. You have Nostradamus, who was very correct about many things. He even predicted the death of a certain royal back when he was still alive, and he actually said how the guy was going to die, and he mentioned 2 separate wounds coming together, and that's exactly how the guy died. He was in some sort of jousting contest, and he got beat up and ended up suffering a couple wounds that connected, and the guy died. I mean, you can't fake that, is what I'm trying to say. You can't fake that. It's so, a lot of people, a lot of skeptics, they're very good at obfuscating this stuff so they can, quickly plant seeds of doubt in a person's mind. And that's kind of what's going on overall, is if somebody does come forward with a piece of information, you have all these skeptics that kind of pile on them and confuse anybody that might be paying attention. Next thing you know, nobody believes in anything, which is the situation we're in right now. People they're not open to the idea of, psychic powers or ceremonial magic and things like that. It's not easy to convince people. If you even start talking about stuff like this, you get dismissed as a foil hat wearing loony, and you can't really expect to keep any of your friends or have people look at you in the same way. So there's a lot of fear. Okay, next story. This is from the Inquisitor, one of my favorite sites. We always bring up the Inquisitor. They have a lot of these stories that are kind of infotainment style, I think. But it does usually seem to be backed up with some sort of source. So this next article is by a guy named John Thomas Didymus. So shout out to him over at the Inquisitor. And he says that the government is considering disclosure about tall white aliens. Whistleblower claims U.S. signed technology transfer treaty with ET species after World War II. So many of you have heard this claim, this theory that there was a time in our past, sometime around World War II, where many alien groups, or 2 alien groups, they contacted the Earth, the governments of the Earth, and they both wanted to make an agreement. There were 2 groups. One wanted us to completely disarm our entire military, turn off all of our nukes, and in exchange they would help us and they would disclose themselves. And then there was another group that was offering to give us technology and wasn't requiring that we turn everything off. And supposedly our government went with that group, the bad ones, right? I'm sure some of you have heard this story before, and I have no idea if it's true, but this story keeps repeating in UFO circles. So the idea is that sometime in the future, let me preface this by saying that a lot of this information comes from a certain individual named Corey Good, who I fully intend to invite on this program because he's kind of the hot thing right now. Or at least if you're a weirdo like me that's super into this stuff. But what he's claiming is that... Oh, it looks like we have a call coming in. Let's go ahead and pick that up and we'll get back to this. Hello.
Hey, Daniel.
Hey, is this Todd?
This is Todd. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I am just enjoying the show. Quite interesting. Enlightened me on the Bellgabbers, the Bellgabbers.
Okay. Did you learn anything interesting?
Well, just that there's that giant community out there. I dropped out of all this because I got spooked a long time ago. I kind of told you my story after 9/11. I kind of didn't want to know, and that was probably when Bellgab was forming. I'm like, I don't want to hear anymore. It's too crazy.
Sure, definitely. It's I've been in and out. I've had times when I was on there, and other times when I've been apart from it. But I've recently been getting back into it, and like I was saying earlier, this guy Michael MV, he's really been doing a great service, I think, and awakening people. Whether he would claim that or not, I think that what he's been doing by archiving these old shows and collecting this information and making it available, there's so much value in that. It's incomprehensible how valuable that is to what we're doing here.
And that is awesome, and he sounds like a smart guy, but did you notice how in his voice he's jaded? He's jaded. This stuff can make you jaded.
Yeah, is there something in particular that... Was there something in particular that made you think that?
Well, there is. Uri Geller. You was reading that news story.
Uh-huh.
And the Uri Geller files, that just backs up the evidence that the government knows about psychic abilities. They use psychics. Uri Geller was a good one because he was a stage magician too, so he could go into other countries and do his magical act and then go back behind the curtains and spy remotely into the Russians or wherever he was.
And then Todd, this is the problem, in my opinion, is that when you have somebody that's a stage magician making all these claims and claiming to be psychic, it's very hard to believe them because you know that they know how to trick people.
Well, and there's a big following. I mean, you can go back in history, and psychics and psychism goes back thousands of years. Had a big resurgence at the turn of the century, and never stopped really. People never stopped believing in psychics and psychism. And so by the time the 70s rolled around and Uri Geller was a huge act, ask anybody, they remember his name, right?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody knows Uri Geller, definitely.
He could get into any country. He could go anywhere. He's loved by everyone. Another actor made a similar claim. The Gong Show host, he wrote a book. They made that movie where he claimed he was a CIA agent and he could go into other countries because the prize for winning the Gong Show is you get to go to some other country, and then while he's over there, he does an assassination. And so, whether it's true or not, nobody knows except for him and the government. But that's what he claimed, the host of the Gong Show. Did you see that movie?
No, I have not seen that. I believe that somebody was trying to tell me about it when it first came out, but I'll definitely have to check that out.
It's incredible. Do you remember the Gong Show?
I don't remember it. I think it was a little before my time, but I'm aware of the premise. Basically, you would have these acts go on there, very much like a modern-day American Idol or America's Got Talent. Yeah, so basically these shows now, they're actually ripping off the Gong Show.
Yeah, and it was funny because it was old and it was cruel. They had a gong where they'd let you play until one of the three, there was three judges, and if the song got too bad or your act got too bad, they'd walk up and bong, hit a gong, and you'd get, kicked off.
Sure.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, because we all love to take pleasure and entertainment in another person's complete humiliation.
Exactly. But that wasn't why I called in, though.
Okay, go ahead.
It was you mentioning Uri Geller. The government was very involved in psychical research. Uri Geller may or may not be real, and he may have been used or may not have been. His story's pretty incredible. He goes around telling his story on different shows nowadays.
He's still alive?
For them.
He's still alive? Uri Geller's still alive, Todd?
Uri Geller worked. Yeah, I believe he is.
Well, if he's still alive, I want to get him on here. I want to get him on this show.
Yeah, he tells the story. I think he might have been on Alex Jones. I mean, that's how big this thing is where he worked for.
So hold on a second. Are you telling me? Are you telling me that he actually worked for the government? He was an agent?
Yeah, and they tested him. This is what they're claiming this week. That they just released the documents, the CIA documents you're talking about. There's so many of them, Daniel, that we can't talk about them all right now. But part of them is that they used Uri Geller, and they found out that he really could remote view, that he could read minds, and they used him, and that's what they just said this week. They showed remote viewing pictures where they would draw a picture and hide it in the next room, and what he would draw, and they're identical, about 6 of them.
Yeah,
and those are top secret files they just released this week.
This is a very interesting area because we have absolute proof that indeed the government was investing so much money, millions and millions of dollars into these side research projects.
The Stargate.
But the idea is that, or maybe not the idea, the theory is that when the remote viewing program closed down, the government remote viewing program, it didn't really close down. They just moved it deeper underground. And nowadays you have people coming forward like Stuart Swerdlow, Preston Nichols, people that claim to have been involved in experiments that go far, far, far beyond the remote viewing program, as if they not only discovered that these abilities were real, but they tapped into it much, much more than any of us would be likely to believe.
Well, the things that we know that they have done and admitted to on record, how incredible these tests and experiments on people that they've admitted to, you can only imagine to the stuff that they might not have admitted to.
Exactly.
That's why you can't discount Stuart Swerdlow and some of these people that claim this stuff. Believe me, like the WikiLeaks is showing that they're more into magic than most people realize, the people that have been running the world.
Yeah, they've been into ceremonial magic and other types of magic while at the same time telling us that it's a bunch of bullshit and it doesn't exist, and the only thing that we should believe in, us stupid poor people, are the dollar bills in our pockets.
Yes. And what it really is it's the mechanisms and the techniques that produce the results that they're hiding, that they're using to manipulate and keep control. But the thing is even their own members are probably all unaware of just how it's the mechanism, not the ritualistic pomp and circumstance items around them, Daniel. It's an energy, but as you've talked about before, they create tulpas. Society creates powerful tulpas that keep running programs.
Yeah. Basically, there's these people are getting together and they're using the power of their consciousness or group consciousness to make noticeable changes in our reality. And this could even be what the Mandela effect is alluding to. Perhaps the reason why the Berenstain Bears turned to the Berenstain Bears turned into the Berenstain Bears is because of some of these rituals that these elite people are doing. They may be actually interfering and changing our reality, our memories, our history. We don't know.
It's a fact that whoever wins the last war, the last battle, whoever prints the books, writes the story. And the history is usually skewed towards the winner, and it hides all the details of the loser. Right?
Yeah, definitely. If you go to another country, like if you go to Great Britain, if you were an exchange student and you grew up there and went to their schools, they'd tell you that the United States was the bad guys during the Revolution, and we were just a bunch of assholes that kind of broke off from their whole thing. They don't make us out to be freedom fighters like we do in our history books.
Well, here's the thing that sits above all that, and everybody realized this. After World War II, the world was pretty much split apart into different countries and all regulated and separated, and giant councils of people got together and established how the future was going to go. And they had a very definite plan, and we've moved there ever since.
Yeah, there's the, alluding to what you're talking about, the United Nations, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the
Globalism.
The globalism. Just as you say, all of a sudden these super groups rose up and they turned into the parties that were dictating everything because they have all the money and they can fund everything. Hey Todd, are you okay? I'm hearing some wind going to your phone.
No, it sounds like the Illuminati messing with us.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Can you hear me?
It sounds like you're blowing into your phone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that sounds much better. Go ahead.
You're kind of breaking up, but anyways, when you talked about Uri Geller, I just wanted to call in because there are psychic people, and people, everyday ordinary average people can reproduce the same effects if they understand how to control their own minds to see their own internal mechanisms that can produce those kind of results. And there's tricks that magicians use, Daniel, because magicians know that there's something that stands between your normal mind and your subconscious mind that won't allow magic to work. And so magicians develop techniques to put their subconscious mind that's blocking everything out of the way for 1 second to allow for magic to work. So they got tricks, put themselves in trances, convince themselves, to look aside for a minute. It's like the art of distracting your own conscious mind that doubts it can happen, so that the deeper conscious mind that knows anything can happen makes it happen.
Yeah, I do completely agree with that. One of the main things that they'll tell you if you were to take part in one of these secret programs is they would tell you that the first thing you need to do is get past the belief that it's impossible, because if you believe that it's impossible for you to be on a pro football team, for example, if you believe that all your life, it's never going to happen. You're never going to make the necessary connections to make it happen because you don't believe it's possible. And the same thing applies for all of this psi research, and they're very good at making us believe it's not possible and keeping us locked in that box with their propaganda and their magics or whatever they're doing to us.
Well, you and I have talked a lot about different things, techniques like visualization, for example. They've tested like 2 basketball teams, and they had one team visualize making a free throw every time, and then the other team didn't do any visualization. And then they pitted them against each other, and the team that visualized making the shot every time beat the team that didn't. Shooters are trained to slow their heart rate down with their mind so that when they pull the trigger, they won't interfere with their smooth flow of the finger action.
Yeah,
divers, Daniel, have learned to go underwater for 20 minutes when most people think the longest you can hold your breath is 4 minutes. Over in Japan or in the South Seas, they've learned how to dive underwater for 20 minutes. They slow their heartbeat down.
Yeah, very
so they
true.
Don't consume as much oxygen.
In fact, we had somebody on here I don't want to say who I think that it was because sometimes I get people mixed up, but we had somebody on here that was actually he was involved in training, I think it was Navy SEALs. It might have been Marines or Navy SEALs, but one of the things that he would teach them to do was listening to their own intuition versus listening to their fear or listening to other motivating factors. If you learn to listen to your intuition, it can actually save your life in a bad situation.
Yeah, I've heard like different commercials and stuff where there's doctors that have developed tapes, cassettes to help soldiers with PTSD, where he teaches them techniques. Some of the techniques are in the heat of battle. They teach them to think about the thing you love the most to get you over the traumatic experience.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
While you're rushing into death, think about your family and everybody you love just to get you through the hardest part.
Yeah, and another thing you can do is pay attention to your dreams, because it's my belief that whatever's out there, let's say that there's angels, demons, aliens, whatever label you want to throw on them, fairies, elves, whatever label, it seems that they indeed do use the dream world to contact us and relay messages to us. So I wouldn't ignore our dreams. I wouldn't ignore your dreams. I wouldn't dismiss it as the brain's garbage that's getting thrown away at night. I would pay very close attention to everything that happens in your dreams. You may find that you're getting messages. You might find that you're actually being manipulated.
Well, you know, I kind of run off a program, you know, my own belief system, where we can program ourselves. I know that's horrible, right?
No, that falls in line with the Timothy Leary stuff, I believe.
Timothy Leary, I read a ton of his books, and I loved how he explained how the world's filled with belief systems. Everybody has a different belief system. By the time the 60s rolled around, there was all that killer counterculture literature, Daniel, which I recommend highly, just for if no other reason than to take in, you know, the history of the period. I'm not saying I believe that everything Leary said, because obviously, you know, Leary's dead and his philosophies have turned out to be not dead wrong, Daniel, but off track. It didn't happen like Larry, you know, wanted it to. Larry's story is incredible, Daniel, because they came to him and gave him the LSD. That's how he became a proponent of expanding your consciousness and the effects of it, the benefits. They used him in the beginning to try to sell it. I don't know if they did, but he was selling it.
Well, there is the conspiracy theory. I've talked about this on this program before. There's a guy named Jan Irvin. You know, as crazy as that guy is, I don't feel bad about throwing him a plug. He seems to think that the entire hippie movement, the entire psychedelic movement, was actually a product of this Tavistock Institute, the New Age movement, the global conspiracy, the global movement that was put forth by people like Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky that started these secret groups, theosophical societies. Madame Blavatsky started it. Alice Bailey kind of followed her up. But these secret societies, these groups, the theory is that they started the entire New Age revolution, the entire New Age movement, and that's where the hippie movement came from.
Oh, yep, that's how it went down. It was, you know, turn of the century, there were a few major groups, and it was Blavatsky's stuff that the Golden Dawn and everything branched off of. But at the same time, over in Europe, you know, like in England, you had the witches, and they had their grimoires and their texts that were pretty powerful movements that influenced, like Eric Gardner, I think was his name, produced some of the most, you know, powerful witch books that were released to the West, and it was during the late 50s, early 60s, it was creeping in. And, you know, I'm suspicious of the whole San Francisco, Daniel, because all the connections with the rock bands and how there was the military complex and Laurel Canyon. And there's a lot of weird shit that goes on out in California. Charles Manson and all this that was going down. And Hollywood that makes all of our social programming back in the 70s when people were slow. People had no idea in the early 70s that any of this shit was going on the surface. But in the background, there was this dark, seething reality that we were just unaware of.
Yeah, and this is hard, very hard for me to even admit that there could be truth to this, because I truly do believe in the 60s movement and the hippie movement and people like the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and John Lennon and these guys. Yeah, exactly. But one thing that I suppose that, since you're talking about it breaking your heart, is that maybe both sides were using this movement. Maybe the bad guys were using it. Maybe the good guys were letting it happen for a purpose as well.
I'm certain they were using unsuspecting artists, and that none of the artists were even aware of how they'd probably be used later on. And the same way it's all going on with American Idol and this.
All right, we got another caller on the line. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm going to let you go.
Where you going, Todd?
Looks like
What's that, Al?
Todd. Yeah, where are you going?
Oh, I was going to get off so you could.
I was just going to add to what you were saying.
And by the way, those songs from Al that we played earlier, the first one is called War to End All Wars, Part 1. That's a remix version. The second one was called 7 Pieces of Silver.
30.
Can I make a comment on those two songs?
Go ahead.
I love those two songs. The War to End All Wars sound like something Art Bell would have played back in the day if he had modern, synthesizers. And then 30 Pieces of Silver, Eminem would be proud. Wow.
I know about all that. But
That's my
review.
review.
I know where the hippie movement started.
I'm Al's biggest fan.
I know a little something about that little hippie movement.
Go ahead.
Back in the 50s, psychiatrists used to prescribe LSD to housewives, suburban housewives, for just for depression, basically. And they'd have little parties, like Tupperware parties, where they'd get all their friends together and have little LSD parties. And back in the late 50s, the United States government started spraying LSD into the fog in San Francisco as an experiment in case an enemy did that with a bomb with us. And it kind of backfired on them. And it was in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. They did those experiments. And that's how the hippies got all turned on to the LSD movement.
So that's a good point, Al. What your point is that some of what happened was obviously an accidental thing where they were experimenting with this drug and their minds were opened, and this was actually an unintentional consequence of mind control experiments that the CIA were doing under the MK Ultra program.
Right, yeah, I was during the MK Ultra program where they'd had water cannons that mounted to the tops of buildings, hooked up to tankers with LSD, and they'd just spray it into the mist form into the fog in San Francisco, because it's real foggy there all the time.
Yeah. And
can I interject for 1 second? Can I interject?
Yeah.
I just want everybody listening to know that Al's dad, his father, he was actually part of the big Haight-Ashbury scene. He was an underground comic producer. Al grew up out in California, San Francisco. He knows that area. So if you want, his dad, a famous comic book producer, underground, the best kind. And so when Al's telling you about San Francisco in the 70s, the 80s, he lived there.
That was a very important time, because that's kind of when everything changed. That's when we went from being people that all had the same hairstyle and wore the same clothes to this whole idea that you need to be accepting of people that are different instead of trying to get everybody to follow along. The hippies were a complete antithesis to what was going on at the time. They were running around. The guys were growing long beards and long hair and running around naked, slipping and sliding through the mud. Yeah, exactly.
And there was actually a movement called the counterculture that sprung out of there. And some people argue that they were the most intelligent people of the time. Timothy Leary, John Lilly.
Go ahead, Al.
They're some of the most intelligent humans to come along, that's for sure.
I think so.
Yeah, they did it.
I think there's definitely some truth to that. The one thing that I've always thought, and a lot of people are probably going to get mad at me for saying this, but I really think that when you use LSD, not that I've done it tons of times, but I do think it actually enhances your intelligence rather than causing you any sort of brain damage.
That's why it's called manslaughter, to give it to anybody.
Timothy Leary wanted to open clinics where he could rehabilitate
because they open your mind so much. Yeah, but because they open your mind so much, that's why it's one of the most vicious crimes out there, according to the government.
Yeah, a lot of.
If you give somebody LSD, it's considered manslaughter by the government.
A lot of this is a control mechanism. Like I was saying, this is my belief that if you just let people experiment with this stuff and made it easily available, you would have some very strange things happening. People's walls would come down and they would
crumble.
Yeah, they would see what sorts of things are going on around them, not only from their own government, but they may even see other dimensions and bleed through from other dimensions and even entities. The way
they realize their own potentials and abilities that they never realized they had.
Sure, and to lend some evidence. To lend some evidence to that real quick is Francis Crick, and he discovered DNA while he was on LSD. Go ahead, Al.
And one time me and my buddies were on some LSD and freaking 5 of us, and all of a sudden all of our minds went up as one.
There you go.
My friends are all looking at each other like, whoa, and I'm just looking around going, I thought it was pretty cool. My friends were tripping, I was just going, hey, this is cool.
Yeah, and you're not the first person I've heard that from. In fact, they actually had a nickname for what would happen, that exact thing that you described. They would call it splicing back in the 60s. They call it splicing.
Wow.
Right. It's like there's 3 separate disciplines of psychology, and in the LSD experiments, whenever a particular psychiatrist or psychologist was talking to the subject was able to describe to the psychologist in the particular school that they were schooled in, like I said, there's 3 schools of thinking in psychology when they're learning it, but they don't all learn the same school. And whenever these students were their subjects were talking to the psychiatrist, they could talk to the psychiatrist in the particular school of learning that they were schooled in. You know what I'm saying? Like they had a telepathic link with them, kind of.
Yeah, you're referring to the idea that we are all connected versus the Freudian approach where things are a little bit more materially grounded.
Yeah. So when they're asking the subject questions and stuff like that, they'd answer them back in the particular school of thought that they were schooled in. And that was true in every single LSD experiment. I just happen to have a book called Book of Illicit Drugs put out by Consumer Reports, which has all those LSD experiments, all reports from all those experiments in it.
They did a lot of them.
Yeah, definitely.
For a very short period until they realized what was going to happen, and then they clamped down on it with Nixon. Nixon was the one that passed the act to make drugs classify them.
Well, what's really disturbing about this? Sorry to cut you off, but what's really disturbing about this, going back to the MK Ultra thing, this was the government dosing innocent, tax-paying citizens, tax-paying voters, with a very powerful and dangerous drug. Dangerous if you don't know you're getting it, and dangerous if you take too much. They were doing this to innocent citizens. They were violating our citizens' rights, just like they always have, and just like they do to this very day. You cannot trust these people. They don't have your best interests in mind. They are a bunch of predators.
They recorded people jumping out of windows to their deaths, gave people LSD and let them run off into the night, oblivious to what happened to them later. And they recorded all that. And you know what's funny about this is the only reason we know this is because of the church hearings that took place in 79. And the reason they took place is because there was a lot of questions surrounding Kennedy's assassination, and the subject came back up, and they had to admit that they were up to a lot of dirty shit. And it blew the American people's minds, and they passed laws to say that they could never do this shit again. But what they really did was they just made the deep state, get deeper. And even though they claim they gave up the mind control projects, they probably just already found what they wanted, and they probably only gave up what was exposed.
Yeah, I would say that that's a very good point you bring up. I was actually, I've talked about this before, I've told you privately, but one of the books I just read was William Cooper's Behold a Pale Horse, and William Cooper actually went out of his way to try to educate people on what actually happened with the Kennedy assassination, and they were sending all sorts of stuff his way. They actually were paying people to go ahead and debate him or interfere with what he was doing, most likely because he was drawing attention to something that, at the time at least, they were still trying very hard to cover up. And if that's not evidence, I don't know what is. Not necessarily what he was presenting, but the way that they were trying to keep him quiet and interfere with what he was doing.
There was a lot of years where I didn't even know exactly what happened, and people reenact his death on YouTube. That's how big Cooper was. They show you how it all went down. But a person filed the Freedom of Information Act request and got back all the documents that the FBI had on Bill Cooper, and it showed that they had bought off almost every person in the town where he lived, and they were using every person to snoop and spy and harass him. And no wonder he came out in the end all freaked out when 12, whoever they were, come up on him all armed. They'd been driving down his neighborhood, if you go watch the videos, all week long, and they were trying to drive him out of his mind.
Yeah, one thing that I learned working in the world of sales and marketing and stuff like that is if you have money, you'll have no problem controlling people because money talks.
But it was in their documents, Daniel, that they asked every person in town, the FBI, if they knew him, and that they were all around him.
But sure, I mean, somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you want to make money being a patriot and just keeping an eye on this guy? Who knows how much gang stalking and harassment and informant type behavior is a byproduct of just normal people getting paid.
People that they can just turn people they've already busted.
There you go. That's another way. Oh, you don't want to go to... Go ahead, Al. Go ahead.
I was just giving some psychic information that if John Jr. hadn't have been murdered in that airplane out there in that ocean there, he would have been inaugurated yesterday.
I think
John Jr.
I think that there's something to that because he had we're talking about John Kennedy's son, the JFK who was assassinated. His son was rising up very quickly. Sorry if I'm yelling again. Was rising up very quickly in the world of New York City politics, New York State, New York City. He was rising very quickly, and he would have been in the position Hillary was in years back, and he died shortly before Hillary came into prominence in New York State.
Right.
Exactly. I'll just give you
in a very mysterious plane crash.
Well, there's been a lot of people being murdered by police this last couple of years. I was informed that they're supposed to be important activists in the future, and certain people in the future are getting rid of them so that they're not there to be activists.
Yeah.
People that got murdering for no reason at all last year.
I haven't told this story yet on air, but I did tell it to Todd privately. But there was actually an attempt on my life when I was around 17, 18 years old that made no sense at all. It was basically just somebody trying to kill me for no reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to be
something similar.
Yeah.
No, it was kind of weird. It was like The Matrix.
Oh, okay, one at a time, guys.
Do you remember The Matrix when the characters would suddenly change once they realized that the target's in range.
Yeah.
The computer would figure out where the the heroes are, and then it would anybody that was around it would morph into a killing machine for the computer.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, when you're dealing with...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. I was just saying it's interesting that on your new logo there, you got that little ship there.
Yep.
My very first song I ever recorded was about a person having a big old ship like that and going out and burying their treasure and then coming back later on in another life to reclaim it.
No, that's a pretty interesting thought. And what I was about to say is that when you mix in alien technology, ceremonial magic, and the idea of time travel, going back and eliminating a threat in the past, the only thing that would stop you from doing that is if there is another side. I know, I apologize to all the listeners out there. I know this is getting really crazy. I apologize. But if there's another side, maybe a good side, that is also stepping in to protect the timeline and protecting certain individuals from being taken out.
Kind of like your average everyday life is. People out there doing bad shit and people out there doing good shit on a psychic plane or on a ethereal plane.
But
I've seen several people announced dead on the news several times, so I can see people out there fixing the timeline to where these people aren't getting killed.
Yeah, something's definitely going on. We'll have to get more into this in the future. Guys, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to let you go. I went a little long with this call, almost 40 minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and move things forward.
Great show, Daniel.
You have a wonderful day, Daniel.
All right. Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Al. Okay, another great call by Todd, and then we had Al join us not long afterwards. Both guys are really helping out this show, so big shout out to those guys and their contributions. Wanted to circle back to this story I was talking about. Maybe I should have gone a little longer with that discussion we were just having. It was getting pretty good, but it was a 40-minute call already, and I know you guys want things to kind of move along. So what I was saying is, shortly before we took that call, actually, let me go ahead and turn off Skype so I don't get any more calls. Okay, so what I was talking about was this idea that sometime in the past, our government became associated with certain alien groups. This guy named Corey Good, he's releasing a lot of information, claims to have some contacts that are providing this information for him, and what he's talked about are breakaway civilizations as well as certain alien groups trying to help us humans. And yeah, it might all be disinformation. It might all be bullshit. Maybe he's finding some way to make money off of all this. I don't know. I can't really make that judgment. But one of the main things he's been talking about is this idea that we're going to have some kind of partial disclosure in the future. So what partial disclosure means is that we would get a disclosure, but it would be a fake disclosure, meaning we would have an alien group come forth and claim to probably be our creators and also claim to be here to help us create world peace, to solve world hunger, to solve all of our problems, make our individual lives much better. And this has been put together with the Christian idea that we are in the end of days and the Christian idea of revelations and the idea that an antichrist figure is going to step forward at some point and perform miracles. The idea is that perhaps this alien group, call them fallen angels if you will, they might help this antichrist leader, whatever he is, whoever he is, they may help him perform miracles or they may help him take control of the entire globe. Now, I don't know if any of this stuff's going to happen. I know I'm mixing together several different theories and possibilities, but I do know one thing for sure. I do know that something is going on. People are seeing more and more UFOs all the time. The Catholic Church has talked about there being aliens and other planets out there. And even the CIA just recently announced that when they were releasing all their documents, a lot of it had to do with UFOs and stuff like that. You'd have to look that up on your own. But basically what you have now are a lot of world leaders, such as Vladimir Putin, the ex-Prime Minister of Canada. A lot of these guys are coming forward and talking about UFOs, aliens, and governments of the world interacting with them, as well as these secret hidden cults and secret societies. So something's up. Something's coming in the future. I'm not sure if it all ties in with Israel. I can't claim to know the specifics of exactly what's happening. But at some point, I'm willing to bet that disclosure is going to happen, because that's the direction that we're headed in. That's why we have so many movies and TV shows about aliens. They're making us more comfortable with this idea. They're making us comfortable with the idea of talking to aliens and not wanting to shoot them. You know what I mean? The idea of pulling out your shotgun and shooting anything that looks different. It seems that the media, society, governments, they're trying to usher us into a psychological state where we're not as afraid of these alien beings. The problem is the deception. The problem is the deception. If we allow one particular alien group to take control of our entire planet, of our species, of our economies, well, not only would they be lying to us and telling us falsities like they're our creators, or that they're the only alien group, or they're here to protect us, we would in effect be shutting out any other alien groups that want to connect with us or want to help us for real. We'll be doing that, and who knows what else we will be giving up. If they say, if this stuff about transhumanism is true, then basically what these aliens or these people want is they want us to all go inside of a matrix. Like, we are already in a matrix, right? Well, they want us to go inside of another matrix where they have even more control over us. If we leave our bodies, if we get so into this virtual reality stuff, sex with robots, sex in virtual reality, if we get too addicted to this stuff, we're going to be living in there 24/7. And at that point, we will just become batteries for these aliens or whatever they are, artificial intelligence, whatever they are. We will become their batteries, and they can use the energies coming off of our bodies as fuel or as creative energy. You hear the term loosh thrown around a lot, or kundalini chi, emotional energy. You hear a lot of terms like that, but if we go inside of a computer program, if we go inside of the computer, we don't know what we're giving up. We might just be letting them totally take advantage of us and preventing us from evolving and reaching that next level of development. You know, they might be stopping our psychic powers from developing by giving us all this technology, because it's just locking us down. It's slowing down our true spirituality, and it's slowing down the true evolution of the planet. I know that sounds totally crazy. I know most of you guys just aren't even into this stuff enough to even grasp what I'm saying or relate to it, and it probably just sounds like complete nutty talk, and I totally get that. But I believe it. I believe it to be true. And I don't know if that's exactly the agenda, but I know that we're coming close to something. We're getting closer and closer every day. There's been an awakening. It started around 2012. People like myself and many other people, a lot of these people that are starting YouTube channels and podcasts and things like that, they've been hit by this wave, and their job is to go out and wake up other people, anybody that will listen. And most people are not going to listen. Most people are going to stay inside the box because it's easier to stay inside the box. Trust me, if I could go back inside the box, I just might, because I miss only being concerned about money or sex or football and things like that. I kind of miss that, but I know that's not reality. I know that that's not the truth. I know that that stuff is just here to distract us. I know that it is pulling us away from the truth. And trust me, these people, these Illuminati, these elitists, they love for you to stay in the box. While they're experimenting with their mind control and their technology and their drugs and their alien shit and their magic, they love for you to believe that none of that stuff is even real, because guess what? They get it all, baby. Yeah, they get to keep everything. It's all for them. They get to hoard this knowledge. They get to go around calling themselves illuminated. We're the only ones who get to know. We're the illuminated ones. We're special. We're special. They want to feel special. That's why they're doing this. No, that's coming to an end. I'm sick of it. From now on, this information, this knowledge is for everybody. Every single person on the planet, male, female, adult, child, black, white, whatever. It's for everybody. And that's the only way we're going to put a stop to this situation where we are being taken advantage of and used and treated as cattle. That's the only way we're going to stop this, is if we become just as educated as those people that are controlling everything. And rant. Okay, so next story. Anonymous hacks Illuminati placing warning on mysterious Bilderberg Group website. So Anonymous has actually gone as far as to hack a Bilderberg website. And this is their message. Each topic you discuss or work you achieve through your uber private meetings should from now benefit world populations and not X or Y group of people otherwise. We will find you and we will hack you. There you go. Anonymous. Everybody knows what Anonymous is. They're saying the exact same thing as me. Quit hoarding this stuff. Quit having private meetings where you get to discuss who lives and who dies. Because you have no right. You are not gods. You people, you Luciferians, whatever you are not gods. You do not lord over us. You do not own us. You're not special. You don't have any power over us. Your money means nothing. It's garbage. We'll burn it right in front of your face. We don't care about you, and we're taking our power back. This is the same thing that Anonymous is trying to do. You don't hear them talking about aliens and stuff like that, but it makes me feel good that there's people out there that are, fighting the good fight. This Anonymous group. A lot of people claim that Anonymous itself is some kind of disinfo campaign. I don't know. You start to go too deep into things and making these accusations. Sometimes I just would rather take something at face value and believe that there are, in fact, a group of hackers out there that know how to conceal their trails, know how to cover up their work, and are actually interested in freeing the planet. That makes me feel good. So shout out to Anonymous and those folks. Let's see here. Okay, so that's it for our news. It only took us over an hour to get through. Let's see here. I do have something I want to play. This was sent by a listener. Sorry about all these weird sounds, but this guy sent this so long ago, and I hate to play this right now, but he did such a good job on it. I think it's kind of funny, and I hate to take a shot at somebody, but I think that this is kind of a funny thing, so I wanted to go ahead and play it. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Let's see here.
Hello?
Hello, Daniel. It's Stephen Hawking here. I wanted to congratulate you on your new show. Just a request, don't have the Mad Martian on. He is fucking mental. Good luck and happy trails.
Okay, there you have it. Apparently somebody does not want me to have the Mad Martian on. Let me play that again.
Hello?
Hello, Daniel. It's Stephen Hawking here. I wanted to congratulate you on your new show. Just a request, don't have the Mad Martian on. He is fucking mental. Good luck and happy trails.
Okay, so you heard that. That was a caller and fan of the show. They are requesting that I do not have the Mad Martian on. Was that mean? I apologize if that was mean to play that. But that guy sent that in a long time ago, and I meant to play it because I said I was going to play stuff that people sent me. And I couldn't get it to work at first because I couldn't figure out how to play stuff off my phone. And it got lost in the shuffle because I got a bunch of emails, and I went back and I dug it up and I found it because I wanted to play that. I thought that was pretty funny. And as far as the Mad Martian goes, I do think that I think that he's holding on to something that is not good for him. And I'm talking about his grudge against Richard C. Hoagland. My main point, I suppose, is that I don't think that Gary is an idiot. Whatever mental problems he has, if he has them, I don't think he's a stupid person. I think that he was smart enough to have been hired and to have worked for Richard C. Hoagland for a number of years until he was betrayed or whatever happened. And for him to go around and call in the Gabcast or call in this show or call in other shows and to just talk about Richard C. Hoagland all the time, I can't help but feel like that's incredibly unhealthy. I'm not saying Hoagland doesn't deserve it. I'm not saying that he's not a bullshit artist or he's not a disinfo agent. I don't know any of those details. But one thing I do know for sure is that there's a lot of stuff going on out there. There's a lot more than what's going on in Richard C. Hoagland's little Enterprise mission bubble, his faces on Mars and stuff like that. I really think that if Gary branched out and got his show back up, I know many have offered to help him with that. I offered to help him get his show back up, and I know that our guest earlier, MV, Michael Vandeven, he actually extended an offer to Gary to help him get his show back up, and I can understand why he didn't accept my offer because he doesn't like me. He thinks that I'm opposed to him in some way, which I'm not. But I don't understand why he wouldn't take MV's offer because MV has helped a lot of people get started podcasting and continues to do so. And if he was making me an offer like that, I would certainly take it because I think that part of the Mad Martian's problem is he doesn't feel like he's getting his message out there in front of enough people. But if he does get back on the air, one thing I really advise him is just to cool it on the Richard C. Hoagland stuff. I mean, we get it. We know that Hoagland's a little bit of a liar. We know that he's embellished and exaggerated a lot of these pictures. But I really think if Gary wants to have a chance at putting on a really compelling show, I think that he needs to really curve back that Richard C. Hoagland stuff and just basically just drop it and go back to being his own person and stop letting this Richard C. Hoagland dictate who he is and what he's doing with his time. I get that some people find it interesting and funny, but he's come on this show so many times, the old version of the show. He's come on so many times and just ranted and raved about the same thing. And I think that he's charismatic enough that if he talked about other stuff and he branched out into other paranormal stuff, that he would be happier and he would find a much bigger audience and actually find a lot more happiness in his life. But that's just my opinion. As far as Richard C. Hoagland, once again, I'm done talking about him. I just don't think that there's anything there that worth talking about. I do believe that there was a civilization on Mars. Maybe we are the Martians. But at the same time, I know that there's something weird going on there. And I know that Gary's right about a lot of things. So I in no way ever did I mean to discount what he's saying, what he's pointing out. There's definitely something there, but being so aggressive is not the way to get your message out there. It just isn't. We talked about being an asshole earlier. There's a fine line. There really is. There's a fine line between being yourself and being entertaining and charismatic until you just start turning people off. And if people hear you just being aggressive and negative all the time, they're not going to want to listen to you. But if they don't hear that ever, they might not want to listen to you either. So it's a fine line. But you just got to be yourself, I think. I know a lot of people that listen to this show are interested in starting their own show, and that's how it's always been. And I'm totally fine with that because if somebody's inspired by what I'm doing, if they want to copy me, I'm semi-okay with that. Don't copy me directly. Like, don't use the same name or just completely copy. But if what I'm doing inspires you at all to start your own show where you spread truth, oh hell yeah, I love that. That is such an empowering feeling, and it makes me, it gives me gratification that I'm reaching people. So by all means, and if you want to come on this program and promote your new show, that's fine with me. I'm not competitive like that. I want you to come on here and talk paranormal and put your show over. That's fine. Maybe you can get some practice in that way. I'm gonna test you on some stuff. I'm gonna ask you about a lot of topics. I'm gonna ask you about conspiracy, aliens, all kinds of stuff like that. But that's what I'm doing here. That's what this show is about. Okay, so a few other things I want to talk about before we stop, because we are going on, we are going on over 3 hours. But one thing I did want to talk about a little bit, I want to talk about Trump. I know I talk about him way too much. I know that I go on and on and on and on, and I doubt really anybody's super interested in hearing this, but once again, there's so much anti-Trump stuff going on out there. It's making me sick. It's making me sick. When people are being violent, when they're not making sense, when they don't even seem like they know what they're protesting, or they seem very uninformed about what they're even involved in, it's so disturbing to me to see that mob mentality. Whether you are a fan of Trump, whether you support him or not, there's no excuse for going out and being nasty and violent against other people, period. You're not a freedom fighter. You're not a rebel. You're not anything. You're a fool. Partly because you are letting yourself become victim of media brainwashing. You're letting yourself be used as a puppet and a tool. I'm not saying you have to like Trump. Of course not. Right? I'm an asshole supporting another asshole, right? I know some of you are probably thinking that, but that's really not the case. Look, we've had Obama for 8 years. He did not change the world. He put a lot of good policies out there. He put a lot of bad policies out there. We know that he protected Monsanto. We know that he was a puppet to a certain extent. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but we know that he was most of his campaign was funded by George Soros. That's documented, right? And we've had 8 years of Obama. We've had 8 years of the liberal types, the socialist types, having exactly what they want. So are you really going to get that angry because we might have 4 to 8 years of a conservative? Is it really going to completely ruin your life? What is he going to do that's so bad? The wall, the healthcare, what is it that you think he's going to do to personally hurt you that justifies going out and being violent against other human beings, or going out acting like a damn fool? I'm not making a claim that Trump doesn't bring this stuff onto himself. Obviously, he's always on the Twitter, and he's always saying controversial things, and you're going to get a reaction. I totally get that. But that does not justify violence against other human beings. It does not. Nothing does. If you think you're a hero because you're throwing eggs in a woman's face, or shooting somebody, or beating somebody up, you're not a hero. You're a zero. You're trash. Look at Martin Luther King. Look at Gandhi. What did they teach? What did they teach? They taught peaceful protest. Do you know why? Because they were smart. They know what actually works. Peaceful protest is how you get your message across. If it's peaceful protest, it has all my respect, because that's the right way to do it, and nobody's getting hurt. Whatever your position is. If you hate Trump, if you love him, if you're an anarchist, if you're a socialist, peaceful protest. Socialism. What is going on, right? You see a lot of people nowadays that are openly socialist. There's a lot of people that are actually putting that label on themselves. That's something you wouldn't be able to do decades ago, because if you were a socialist, they'd call you a communist, and they might even kick you out of this country. Now you have people going around waving the socialist flag. I highly encourage you folks out there to disregard socialism. For one thing, this has never been a socialist country. It has never been a socialist country. We might be headed in that direction, but for most of this country's existence, it has never been socialist. And you people out there with your ideals and your philosophies and this idea that you have of some kind of socialist world where everybody's accepted and everybody gets along, please understand that you are a victim of mind control. This is not a socialist country. It has never been. Our founding fathers had a very clear-cut plan for what this country was supposed to be all about. And we have held on to that up until this point. We have held on to democracy. We can't let this democratic country, this bastion of freedom that I still believe that it is, the United States of America, we cannot let this country succumb to socialism. Because that's not what this country is. We can't let people who live in other countries tell us how to live. We can't do that. That is not freedom. We don't want to do that. Socialism sucks. We're Americans. We're free. We love big cars, fast cars, guitars, and big butts. We don't need socialism. It's not going to help us. I'm not saying everything's perfect. I'm not even saying that we shouldn't have universal health care. Probably should have something, of course, right? Does that mean we should just let tons and tons of people in this country and give them free stuff as soon as they arrive? No, that's insanity. These people that are championing those efforts, what's wrong with you? You think that you can just give away other people's money, that you can waste money that we're paying with our taxes and just give it to people that are coming in? That's not racism. It's taking care of your own before you extend a hand and take care of people in other countries. And that's what we should be doing. We need to take care of our own. Let me tell you, I live in Seattle. There are homeless people everywhere. We are not taking care of our own. We're not doing a damn thing. They're starving, they're hungry, they're cold. They're being taken advantage of. Gangs of punks go around and they beat up and kill these homeless people. Nobody's doing a damn thing for them except letting them sleep in the middle of the sidewalk, which nobody wants. I'm telling you all, there's something very wrong going on in this country. For one thing, we all need to get past this idea of liberal versus conservative. Because let me tell you, that's why we have most of the bullshit going on that we have. We all need to throw away those ideas, and we need to meet in the middle and be sane and rational. We need to figure things out. Giving stuff away is not the answer, nor is being a radical right-winger. That's not the answer either. I mean, for one thing, the abortion issue, I'm really against them getting rid of abortion. I mean, we need some population control. Let's put it that way. I mean, it's insane. But anyways, enough of that. I think I've forced my beliefs on people enough this evening. The other thing I want to talk about is, as many of you know, I recently split with my co-host, the person who I thought was my best friend. And I have an empty position available. So if you're interested in being Daniel's new best friend, if you'd like to submit an application or tell me why you would make a good best friend or why you would be able to meet my particular needs as a best friend, feel free to send me an application at danielendofdaysradio@gmail.com, or you can use the contact us page on the website. I am taking applications for you to be my new best friend. I might read your application on air. So if you don't want that to happen, you should probably not apply. But I am taking applications for Daniel's new best friend. So if you're interested, I look forward to hearing from you. Another thing I want to talk about is a TV show. I just wanted to let you guys know is really good. It's a show on the History Channel called Vikings. Oh my God, is that show good. I just went through a marathon where I watched like 15 episodes in a row, or 16 of them. I'd watched it for years, and it felt like things were kind of slowing down, so I stopped watching, and then I didn't have anything to watch, so I started watching again. Oh my God, why did I quit watching? Why did I stop watching? If I would have just watched like one more episode. For those of you that have not seen the show yet, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but go watch that show right now. That's Vikings on the History Channel. Get it any way that you can. I know they've got it on Amazon Prime. I just got that Amazon Prime thing, and let me preface this and say that Amazon does not pay me anything. I'm not part of any affiliate programs or anything like that. I used to be, but never made me a dime, so I got out of it. But Amazon is fucking awesome. Amazon Prime is pretty cool. I mean, you get your stuff. If you live around here, you get it in like 1 or 2 days. But this, not only do you get your stuff faster and you get a discount on it, but you have access to like Amazon's own Netflix, meaning you put an app on your iPad or your phone and you can watch shows like Vikings anytime you want, any episode. They even have old stuff on there. They have tons of movies, tons of stuff to watch. I know this sounds like a commercial. Trust me, it's not. It's just an individual who found something new that is kind of excited about it. So I highly recommend that Amazon Prime. There's so many shows, so many movies on there. Vikings included, as well as all kinds of other classic series. So I definitely want to recommend that Amazon Prime. And if you do get Amazon Prime, make sure you download the app so that you can get the movies and TV shows for free. You just click play and it streams it. That's how simple it is. And you can get it on not just your devices, but if you have a Roku or a PS4 or PS3 or an Xbox, you can get it on there too. So you can just hook it up to your Wi-Fi and it's like having cable, but it's way better than cable. Your money goes way further. So if you had cable and you no longer have it and you need something, I highly recommend Amazon Prime. Combine it with Hulu and Netflix and you have everything. You don't even need to pirate anything, or you know what I'm saying? Why am I giving free commercials away to these asshole companies? But that does bring up another thing that I want to talk about. I wanted to kind of talk about my new mentality and who I decided that I am. I'm somebody that's worked a lot of jobs, and I've worked for corporations, and I hit a very important moment in my life not that long ago where I realized that I'm not a money or success oriented person. I'm not motivated by those things. I've been most of my adult life, but I realized that that's not me. I've talked about this a little bit before, like when I had Isabella Harris on, but more and more I've just been realizing how empty success or money can be when you put hours and hours of your life into something. You don't even have time for anything else, and the only reward are egotistical rewards, material rewards. If you stay too long in that life, you can quickly find yourself completely spiritually dehydrated. What I realized is that I'm actually an artist. When I started doing this show, especially when I started picking up the guitar again, when I got behind the mic, when I realized how much I enjoy getting this information to people and trying to make people laugh and creating this art, creating music, I realized I'm an artist. I'm an artist. I don't even mind being a starving artist, but I would rather do the things that are fulfilling to me spiritually than the things that are fulfilling to me materialistically. Hopefully I can find some kind of healthy balance because, nobody wants to be starving, but I really realize that I am an artist. I'm not a corporate tool, and I never will be again. I'm an artist, and I really believe in what I'm doing. I believe that it's authentic. I believe in being honest and straightforward. Once again, you will never see ads on this program. I'll never make any deals like that. I'll never do the ads. I'll never put this show behind a paywall. Ever. That's not why I'm doing it. I don't want money from this show. I don't want it. I feel no need to try to get money through this show. There's plenty of other ways that you can make a buck. You can work, you can create businesses, you can do a lot of things. There's no reason why I need to have money come through End of Days Radio. There's no reason for that. I feel that not having that factor involved is good for creating that credibility. It doesn't force people to look at obnoxious stuff they don't want to see or hear. And it makes me feel better about what I'm doing. It makes me feel more authentic. It makes me feel like it's real. It makes me feel like it's a completely positive thing. Whereas you look at a thing like Alex Jones and there's penis pills and stuff like that. I don't want to go down that route. It just really feels cheesy when you do. It feels cheesy. So this show is always going to be free for you, free for me. And I hope that you enjoy it. If you have any feedback for me, go to the website, go to the contact us, or you can connect with me on Twitter. I'm Ninja Shoes on Twitter. Remember, you can get this show on iTunes. That's the main way most people listen. So just get that iTunes app and search End of Days Radio. You can also get us on Stitcher if you are a Android user as opposed to the iPhone. So go to get that Stitcher app, search End of Days Radio. If you are on YouTube only, you can get us through there as well. Once again, End of Days Radio. The actual channel that I'm on YouTube is Ninja Shoes, so that's the channel. And if you use the TuneIn Radio app, this is very important, and this applies for Facebook as well. There is a End of Days Radio on the TuneIn app. That's not my show. You know, I'm sure you guys can guess what that is, but that's not my show. So if you want to listen to me, go to the TuneIn Radio app and search for EODR. It's very plain, very simple. I don't think there's even a picture on there, or there isn't one yet. But just go to EODR on the TuneIn app, and you can listen to the show live on Saturday nights or whenever I broadcast live. So that's all the ways you can get the show. So it's very easy to get me if you like listening. And I'm going to keep doing things this way. I'm going to keep doing the guests up front and then doing the chit-chat afterwards, so I don't drive people nuts. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. Holy crap, what a great show. I still got plenty of Mountain Dew and plenty of Cheetos left. Oh boy. Remember to go back and listen to that show with Robert Stanley. It's very good. Big shout out to all the Bellgabbers out there. Shout out to all those people like Yorkshire Pud and Brig and Chefist. Sorry I couldn't take your call, but big shout out to you guys. I love you all. I plan on spending much more time on Bellgab in the future. And if you enjoy listening to me, if you're a fan of pro wrestling or mixed martial arts, you can check out ninjashoes.net. That's where my new pro wrestling / MMA shows is posted. Once again, that's kind of a secondary project as far as, keeping things pure and straightforward. I'm not really going to worry about that so much with that other show, because it doesn't need to have the same integrity that End of Days Radio has. So that's a completely separate project, but I'm going to be investing some time into that. This will always be the main thing. I have a mission here. I want to wake people up. I want to make them aware of things. So this will always be the main thing. But I have other projects out there, mainly because this other show, I like being on air, and I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. And I've always wanted to be able to give my thoughts about that topic. But I know that is of no interest to the people that listen to this show, so I'm keeping things separate. So I like to think I'm doing a service to the listeners of this show. And tell your friends. Tell your friends about this show. Help wake them up. Tell them about this show. If there's anything I can do to make it a little bit more listenable, I'll certainly take your feedback into consideration. And until then, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to Michael Vandeven, who also known as MV, who joined us tonight. Big shout out and thank you. And a big thank you to all the fans who have stuck with this program through thick and thin, who are embracing or at least giving this program with me a chance. There's so much work for us to do, so much work for me to do. And I'm just all in. I'm taking every little bit of time and energy and personal power that I have, and I'm delving right into this. I don't care about the consequences. If I piss off some Illuminati people, or if I piss off people out there, piss off some alien groups or some demons or something. I'm just going to keep doing it. And if they do stop me, I'm going to come back in the next life. I'm going to be born here again. I'm going to reincarnate, and I'm just going to keep working. So you can't stop me. I'll see you guys here. What do we have up ahead? Our next show is listed as February 4th, but I'm not going to take next week off. So we might just do a show where we take calls, or I might find a guest. If you want to come on Saturday, let me know. But we'll see what happens. I do have some shows planned, but I do want to do something special next week. I'm just not quite sure what yet. But I'll be here, same time. We're going to do 7:45 now. So 7:45 Pacific Standard Time, 7:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at endofdaysradio.com. That's the real, true, and only home of End of Days Radio. So endofdaysradio.com. You'll see the black ship at the top, and it'll say From the Broken Ruins of Babylon. So I'll see you guys here next Saturday night, and we'll do it again. And until then, thank you, everybody. I am the voice in the night, and we are the resistance.
Winter's coming.
The king has returned from the broken ruins of Babylon. This is the end of days.